owner of the US Mega Farmest video is Puremont para Intratnamiento no infringe de Recos de Autorenales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 101 Kevin Dupont. Ignoring Eva, who was making a fuss, Kianzu looked at the whole piece of beef and mutton that Dale had just taken out and had been thawed. He rolled up his sleeves and started cutting pieces to prepare for the barbecue. Eva and Dale trotted into the villa, preparing to wash the vegetables they had just picked. The silver bell-like laughter accompanied the brisk footsteps of the two people and came into Kianzu's ears from time to time. Looking at the backs of the two women, Kianzu sighed in a pretentious way. It's good to be young. Before Kianzu finished cutting the meat, the sound of car engines sounded in the distance. Kianzu looked up and saw several cars queuing up and driving over. Hey, boss, let me help you. The car hadn't stopped yet. Kianzu heard Rick's iconic loud voice, a typical example of a person who arrives before he arrives. Come on, the rest is up to you. Kianzu also handed over the knife in his hand without hesitation, just in case he was in no mood to do anything. Just as the ranch was busy preparing for the evening barbecue party. At this time, in the west end of Boston, a bar called Crazy Night, on the second floor of the slightly run-down bar, several black men with big bald heads stood in front of a desk. The leading black man was facing a boss chair with his back to them, and was talking carefully. You mean, the yellow monkey who caused my son to go to jail? You finally found out his whereabouts? A gloomy voice came into the ears of the leading black man. It was as if it came from the sky outside, cold and without a trace of emotion. The leader, who was already a little cautious, was involuntarily alerted, and even the four black men in black suits standing behind him trembled slightly, lowering their bald heads even lower. The black man in the lead said tremblingly, Boss, yes, because that damn yellow monkey has been elusive, and we brothers followed him for a long time before we finally determined his whereabouts. At the end, the leader's voice was a little trembling. It is conceivable how much pressure the man with his back to him brought to him. Since we have found his whereabouts, why are you still staying here? You can't even deal with the yellow monkey, do you still need me to do it myself? A bunch of trash. However, when the leader's voice just fell, the voice that was just vague and emotionless suddenly became a little angry. Along with the angry voice, the swivel chair opposite turned around with a sudden sound, and with it, a thick light blue folder hit the leader's bald head exactly. Although with the leader's skills, it was easy to dodge this folder that was not too fast. But when the folder hit his head hard, he still stood there without daring to move. Sitting on the boss's chair was a middle-aged white man in his 50s, bald, and with the same body shape as most American elderly people, a little fat, with a big beer belly, making people feel that it would be difficult for him to put on his shoes. It stands to reason that such a figure should be easy and give people a sense of humor, so how could he scare the several strong men opposite so hard? But when you see his sharp eyes, you will understand, because the eagle-like eyes reveal a fierceness and murderous aura that is completely opposite to his appearance. Edward Harvey looked at his boss who was staring at him angrily, and his heart was full of bitterness. The reason why he came to report so late was to give his boss a few days to calm down. He knew his boss's temper very well. His only son was sent to prison by someone, and it was a Chinese who did it. If he knew where the murderer was at the time, it would be strange if he didn't rush to the door with people. However, he didn't expect that after several days, the boss was still so angry. But when Harvey thought of the instigator of that incident, he had a headache. If it was just an Oriental, he would have killed him directly. It's true that he is an Oriental, but he is damn rich. In the capitalist society of the United States, what can't you do with money? Let's not talk about whether he can touch him. If he dares to do something to a billionaire today, he dares to guarantee that he will never see the sun tomorrow. The police and FBI in the United States will never mind letting the world see their efficiency in handling cases. Kevin Dupont stared at his confidant and beloved general. His father died when he participated in the Korean War. So he has always hated the Chinese. With the care of his father's friends and his courage to fight, he is now a figure in Boston. Unexpectedly, in the end, even his only son was put in prison by the Chinese. Harvey couldn't stand the cold eyes of his boss. He knew that if he didn't express his opinion, his doom would come first. Concealing the bitterness in his heart, it was time for him to work hard. Harvey looked directly into his boss's hawk-like eyes and promised loudly, Boss, don't worry, we will take care of this matter. We promise to satisfy you. Thereupon stared at Harvey for a long time, then loosened his right hand holding the desert eagle under the table, nodded with satisfaction, and said, "Very good, Harvey, I will give you another 3 days. If you can't bring the yellow monkey back to me, you should know the consequences." "Yes, boss, don't worry, I promise to bring the yellow monkey to you within 3 days." Harvey promised with a serious face and patted his chest. Thereupon waved his hand, indicating that Harvey could leave. He was quite satisfied with this confidant. Except for the fact that he was a little negligent in asking him to follow the yellow monkey this time, he was still very reliable in doing things. Since he said so, he would give him another chance. When Harvey walked out of the bar slowly with a few of his men, his back was already soaked with cold sweat. Looking back at the huge neon sign of the bar, it began to flash colorful lights in the evening. "Brother, aren't you forcing the brothers to die? Everyone knows that those capitalists cannot be moved. The boss is pushing our brothers into the fire pit." Harvey turned around and slapped him in the face before his younger brother finished speaking. "You bastard, have you forgotten who gave you the money? Next time I hear you say that, you don't have to go to die, I will kill you first." Staring fiercely at this reckless younger brother, Harvey roared with some anger and a little reminder. Thanks to the evil Studgen, Lonely, Morankai and Ra for their rewards and support, and there is another person whose name I can't see who rewarded 388 book coins. Thank you for your support. Chapter 102 Tomato Salad. Only after they walked out of the block did Harvey wipe his forehead in fear, and then stared at the reckless guy fiercely, and scolded him. "Asshole, this is still on the boss's territory, and you dare to talk nonsense like this. If this is heard by others, our brothers will not have to go to their deaths, and now it is even a question whether we can get out of this block. You bastard." At the end of his words, he couldn't help but raise his foot and kick the reckless subordinate. The kick made him stagger and almost fall. But even so, this guy didn't dare to complain at all, because the other brothers were also staring at him with a cannibalistic look. They all knew their boss's character, and what Harvey said was definitely possible. It was just that he was impatient and spoke too quickly. "Boss, I'm sorry, I was impatient, but what should we do now?" Patting the dust off his body, the guy quickly apologized to Harvey and asked as if his parents had died. Hearing his subordinate's question, Harvey suddenly lost the desire to argue with him. Yes, what should he do now? Harvey guessed correctly. Before he walked out of the block, the scene that happened at the door of the bar just now had reached Lapont's ears. Before he took a few steps, Lapont received a call. After hearing the report from the other end of the phone, Lapont thought for a while, and whispered a few words to the other end, so that they could successfully leave this famous dark block. Not to mention how big the shadow in Harvey's heart was at this time, Kinzu was now watching a group of people coming not far away. This group of people came a little too much, more than 10 people, among which there were 2 half-grown boys who were playing with each other, which made Kinzu a little nervous. Although he already knew the cowboys on the ranch, it was the first time Kinzu saw their families. There were so many cowboys on the ranch, but only Ryan and Rick were married. The Lott brothers and several other cowboys were still single. John was familiar with them and was just about to introduce them to Kinzu. "Hi, boss, I'm Little Tom. I'm also a little cowboy." Accompanied by a slightly immature English, a black little head suddenly appeared in front of Kinzu. It interrupted John's introduction before he could start. "Oh, really? Are you Little Tom? Then who is your father?" Kinzu looked at the little black man who was only a little over 1 meter tall and asked with interest. "Of course it's old Tom." The little guy answered as if it was a matter of course. Patting his head, Kinzu was a little speechless. This answer was really impeccable. "Ha ha. Boss, this is my son Free Tom. They just called him Little Tom." Rick put down the beef he was cutting, raised his head and said with a smile. "Oh, Little Tom, how old are you this year? Do you go to school?" Kinzu smiled and touched the little guy's head and asked. Of course he knew that this was Rick's child. He was the only black man in the whole ranch. Oh, no, now there is also his wife and children. 8 years old, already in school. Little Tom answered with a childish face, and ran to his father to watch the fun. John looked over there, and saw a white boy who was about the same age as Little Tom, who was watching the fun with Rick, and smiled helplessly and said, "Children can't stay still." The one next to Little Tom is Ryan's child, Daniel Hanks. Kinzu nodded, indicating that he understood. Looking at the cowboys who came together and the 2 women around them. "Boss, this is my wife, Yweni Laurie. The lady next to her is Real's wife, Sammy Roman." Ryan put down the bag he was carrying with the Lot brothers, and pointed to the two women who were helping to carry things and introduced them to Kinzu. "Hello, boss, thank you very much for letting us live in the ranch." Lori and Roman quickly put down their things and greeted Kinzu. Lori and Roman can be said to be two extremes, one black and one white, one fat and one thin. Lori was a standard blonde white woman, blonde and blue eyes, with a few wrinkles on her face, but she was a little bloated, probably because she had given birth to a child. Roman, on the other hand, was a standard black girl. Although she was black, she had a nice face and showed 2 rows of white teeth when she smiled. Although her figure was not very good, she looked quite hot, but her hips were a little too big, which ruined the overall beauty. Kinzu smiled and greeted them, then motioned for everyone to sit down. He went to clean up the grouper meat that several people brought over. The grouper had been directly deboned by John and the others, and the fish meat was divided into pieces and brought all over. Although Kinzu knew that Americans like to eat grilled fish, he still took out a lot of fish fillets and prepared to mix them with batter and fry them. Kinzu called Ryan for the remaining fish meat, and the two of them carried it into the villa kitchen, and Kinzu prepared to marinate them all. The remaining cowboys were not idle either, and they all started to prepare to string the meat skewers and save them for barbecue in the evening. At this time in their villa, Dale and Eva were making vegetable salad. Because there was no fruit, they had to make some tomato salad instead of fruit. After Kinzu put down the fish, he picked up the fork next to him and picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. Well, it was sour and sweet, and it was juicy and tasted great. Seeing Kinzu eating so deliciously, Eva couldn't help but pick up a piece with a fork. She had been busy until now and hadn't tasted her own cooking. As soon as the tomato went at her mouth, Eva couldn't help but open her eyes wide. She was very surprised at her cooking skills. When did it become so good? Eva, your cooking skills are getting better and better. You're catching up with the chefs of star-rated hotels. Kinzu couldn't help but pick up another piece and put it in his mouth. Although he knew that the quality of the tomatoes was good, he still praised Eva with admiration. Eva couldn't help but pick up another piece and put it in her mouth. Well, it was still the same taste, sour and sweet. Could it be that her cooking skills have really improved again? But she still made it according to the old method. The poor child was a little confused. Dale looked at Kinzu's exaggerated performance, curled her lips a little, and picked up a piece with a fork and put it in her mouth. It's not like she hasn't eaten Eva's salad before, so she didn't believe that Eva's cooking skills could improve much. But when she just started chewing, she was a little confused. Was this really made by Eva? Why did it taste different from before? Could it be that this girl's cooking skills have improved, or is there some secret? Dale looked Eva up and down with some doubts. Eva was a little at a loss when her sister looked at her, and quickly waved her hands and said, "Sister, don't look at me, I don't know why the vacation ended like this, and now I'm still stuck on the highway. A new week, please recommend, collect and reward." Chapter 103. Cowboy Past. Hearing Eva's incoherent words, everyone present laughed out loud. Ryan helped put the fish meat away and then said goodbye. His boss was making the little girl happy, why should he stay here to join in the fun? He didn't even think that the tomato salad would be delicious. It was good enough that it was not greasy to eat it every day. After Kinzu and the cowboys marinated the grouper meat and the skewers to be grilled in the evening, it was already dark and only the afterglow of the sunset could slightly see some movement not far away. In the open space in front of the villa, Ryan and Real were busy adding charcoal to the barbecue grill. The Lot brothers and several cowboys also lit a few fires nearby. They were adding pine branches. While several people were laughing and making noises, 2 dazzling lights shone in the distant twilight, like sharp swords cutting through the sky and going straight into the sky. Accompanied by the sound of horns, several more lights appeared one after another, and 5 small cars drove to the front of the villa one by one. Now the parking space, which was originally very spacious, was not enough. Kinzu looked at the cars parked on the grass outside and felt for the first time what a country on wheels means. At first, I didn't feel much. In the past, Ryan and Real's cars were driven by their wives at home. Although Locke and his friends drove here, they all parked in the living area. This time, taking advantage of the opportunity of moving, Ryan and Real also drove their cars here. Together with the Lot brothers and Ots, there are 5 cars. Even the 2 cowboys in the past of the ranch have cars. 7 cars have already filled the open-air parking lot of the villa. Now there are 5 more cars. Kinzu couldn't help but complain, "Is this a car exhibition?" Complaining, Kinzu still greeted them with a smile. After all, this is their first time to the ranch. The car doors opened one by one, and several people got out of the car one after another. Kinsey looked around and found that only Will came with his wife. Simon and Gavin Eden, Austin Hubbard and Derek Patience all drove here alone. Repressing his curiosity, Kinsey took John and shook hands with them warmly, and welcomed them to sit down by the fire. After everyone sat down, John took the initiative to introduce everyone to Kinsey's signal. In fact, except for a few people, everyone knew each other more or less. After all, Revere is not a very big place. Will, it's been a long time since we last met. I never thought that we would work together one day. Ryan got up and sat down next to Will. He nodded to Simon on the side, bumped his fist with Will, and said with emotion. After bumping fists with Ryan, Will also looked at him with emotion, and said bigly, I didn't expect it either. I thought I could enjoy my old age, but who knew? At the end, Will sighed deeply with helplessness. He is much older than Ryan. When he was working, Ryan was still in school. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, the two had become colleagues? Patting Will's broad shoulders gently, Ryan comforted him. Don't worry, Will, everything will pass. Will smiled bigly. Yes, everything will pass. On the other side, Real was not idle either. After saying a few embarrassing words to his wife, he patted his butt and ran towards Simon, leaving the man alone with a dark face. It was hard to tell whether his face was red or not. Hey, man, I didn't expect to see you here. Looking at Real, Simon's eyes lit up and he greeted him enthusiastically. As black people born and raised in the white world, it was not surprising that the two knew each other. Hey, brother, are you okay? Haven't you been on the West Coast? Why are you back? And where is your lover, my brother's wife? Real was different from the taciturn Simon. He threw a long list of questions at the beginning. Simon was obviously confused by the questions. After a long time, he finally reacted. He shook his head with a wry smile and sighed, after so many years, you are still so impatient. Real was obviously dissatisfied with Simon's change of subject, and curled his lips and said, this is called boldness. You know, there is no black person who speaks as slowly as you. Hurry up, you haven't told me why you are back yet. There was no other way, Simon had to tell Kinsey everything and repeat what he said to Kinsey today. Looking at Simon's sincere look, Real's intuition told him that there must be something wrong. Don't ask why, it's just a man's sixth sense. Staring at Simon with burning eyes, Real said, boy, you've been out for a few years, and now you've become dishonest, right? Where's Julia? Didn't she come back with you? Being stared at by Real, even if Simon knew that this guy had a wife, he was still a little nervous. Hearing the question, he quickly raised his hands and surrendered. Okay. Okay. I said it. Real was a little reluctant, and retracted his naked gaze, and licked his lips seriously, looking hungry and thirsty. Shivering, Simon was a little helpless, and rolled his eyes at this pretentious guy, saying, I'm afraid of you. You look so hungry. People who don't know would think that Roman didn't feed you enough. After a pause, Simon sighed deeply, and said a little lonely, I can't compare with you. You now have a happy family and sensible children, but I have nothing. Real was stunned and said in disbelief, What? What do you mean? Simon spread his hands helplessly and sighed, That's what I mean. I divorced Julia, she stayed in Los Angeles with her daughter, and I didn't want to stay there, so I returned to Revere. But, how could you? Didn't you come back together to celebrate Christmas the year before last? Real still couldn't accept the fact. Although divorce is very normal in the United States, it is mostly young men and women in big cities. People in small towns like this still care about these things. Will, who was happily chatting with Ryan, John and others, heard the noise here, frowned slightly, apologized to several people, and walked over. Seeing that Real wanted to say something, Will patted his shoulder, shook his head gently at him, then put on a smile and said, Okay, Real, don't say so much. Simon is not feeling well either. Let's not talk about this topic anymore. We should celebrate finding a good job today, right? Thank you to my wife for the reward. I can't repay you. Leon can only give her my body. Yesterday, my wife read my novel and said it was not bad. I felt excited immediately. I won't say anything. I'll go to write. Chapter 104 Preliminary Conception of Fisheries. Hearing this, Real could only suppress his doubts and worries about not seeing his friend for many years, forced a smile, and agreed. Yes, let's go sit over there. Seeing the performance of the two, Simon smiled and said, "It's nothing, let's go." While everyone was laughing and joking with each other, Kinzu called ale, and the two went to the villa warehouse together and took out all the beer and wine purchased last time. After all, there was enough wine for today's party. The oven in front of the villa was already filled with red charcoal fire. Seeing Kinzu carrying the wine out, John stepped forward to take it and said, "Boss, it's almost time to start." Kinzu handed the wine to John to distribute. Looking at the unusually lively crowd, Kinzu clapped his hands gently to attract everyone's attention. The cowboys also looked at Kinzu with face, waiting for the routine speaking time before each party. In this regard, we Chinese are not the only ones who are proficient. Kinzu coughed a few times and said nervously, "Today, we have 5 new members in our ranch. Welcome everyone." After that, Kinzu took the lead in applauding. After a brief moment of distraction, the cowboys, led by John, reacted and clapped vigorously. Kinzu suddenly felt a little sweat on his forehead. He almost forgot that this is not China. How could anyone be so sensible and take the lead in applauding when the leader speaks? He looked at John with admiration. It turns out that the old ones are still the best. However, seeing that the applause had not stopped for almost a minute, Kinzu began to sweat again. He quickly raised his hands and pressed them down. Fortunately, this international action was understood by foreigners. The applause slowly stopped. After the applause stopped, Kinzu rubbed his stiff face and continued, "Everyone is familiar with each other just now, so I won't introduce you here. In short, I hope everyone can work and live happily together in the future. I also hope that everyone can let go of their stomachs and eat and drink to their heart's content tonight." As soon as the voice fell, the applause sounded like thunder. Kinzu curled his lips secretly. No matter where you are, food and drink is still the most tempting. After waving his hand and signaling everyone to come as they please, Kinzu took a bottle of open beer, came to Will's side, and sat down. "Boss." Will had just put a roasted legged lamb on the fire at this time. When he saw Kinzu come in, he put the legged lamb in place and turned around to say hello. Nodding to the old fisherman, Kinzu raised the bottle to signal. Will quickly picked up his bottle and clinked it with Kinzu. Kinzu raised his head and took a big sip of cold beer. After a comfortable burp, he asked directly, "Will, what do you think we need to do now if our fishery needs to produce as soon as possible?" Will took a sip of the beer in the bottle and thought for a long time before speaking. "Boss, if we just need to produce, we only need to buy an offshore fishing boat to fish nearby. If I remember correctly, this fishery has not been opened for fishing for many years. The catch should be very good." Kinzu nodded slightly after hearing this, took another big sip of beer, and began to think about it. Although Kinzu himself did not know much about the price of fishing boats, according to Will, an offshore trawler, even if it was brand new, only cost $500,000 or $600,000. Now, we only need to buy such an offshore trawler. Add a few small patrol boats and the like, and the fishery can officially produce. But, boss, while we are fishing, we should also continue to release some fish fry. Will looked at Kinzu with some worry, fearing that his new boss only wanted to catch some fish to sell for money, and had no intention of developing the fishery. Patting Will's shoulder, Kinzu came back to his senses from his thoughts and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I know what to do. I plan to vigorously develop the fishery, but I don't want it to be gone in such a short time." Will was relieved and smiled awkwardly at Kinzu without saying anything. While talking, the roasted lamb leg on the fire had already exuded an attractive aroma, accompanied by a sizzle sound. The fat on the lamb leg was roasted and splashed everywhere. Smelling the tempting aroma, Kinzu couldn't help it, but looking at the big lamb leg, it was obviously not something that could be roasted in a short time, so he had to go to John to get some food first. Biting the lamb chops roasted by John, Kinzu looked at a group of cowboys over there who left the roasted lamb chops uneaten and ran to eat vegetable salad, feeling a little speechless. Ryan looked at the empty plate and felt like crying. Just now, there was such a big plate of vegetable salad in front of him. But he didn't cherish it. As a result, now there is only such an empty plate. "Hey, Eva, when did your cooking skills become so good? Is there any more of this salad?" John looked at Eva with a surprised expression. "I remember that you cooked for me last year. Why does it feel completely different from today? Did you do it on purpose?" Eva, who felt a little uncomfortable being looked at by John, whispered, "Uncle John, I don't know about this. I just made it according to the usual method." "Really?" He looked at the girl with some doubt. "Is it true?" Ignoring the farce over there, Kinzu looked at the sleepy little Jerry on his shoulder, a little confused. Did this guy just wake up? He was so busy today that he forgot about the little things in his family. He stretched out his hand to scratch the little Jerry's fluffy tail and asked, "Little guy, have you seen Daha and her? What did you do today?" Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 105. Morning Fun. Little Jerry stretched out his little paw and pointed towards the house, which meant that they were all staying in the house. Just as he was talking, Kinzu saw two little guys trotting over from the house not far away. Maybe it was because Dale and Eva were busy and no one prepared dinner for them, so the two little guys couldn't help but run out by themselves. When Daha and Xiaohe ran up to him panting, Kinzu picked up the two guys, tore off a few small pieces from the roasted lamb leg, and tried to feed them. Kinzu was just trying it out, but he didn't expect the two guys to really eat it. After eating, Daha stretched out his pink little tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. He looked cute and unsatisfied. Seeing this, Kinzu was relieved. It seems that the little guys don't need to make milk every day anymore, and they can eat something else. Kinzu and his three pets were eating happily, but Eva was a little helpless. After making a salad on the spot again, the picked vegetables were used up. At this time, both Dale and Eva saw the problem. The delicious salad is not because of Eva's cooking skills, but the key to deliciousness is the vegetables. But unfortunately, after telling everyone was skeptical. After all, these looked like ordinary vegetables, not specially cultivated. But everyone has almost eaten, so there is no more entanglement. What's more, John also said that he would let Susie use the vegetables in the vegetable garden to cook for everyone tomorrow. So everyone returned to their seats and continued a new round of drinking. The whole party lasted until 9 o'clock in the evening. Kinzu, who thought he could drink well, collapsed on the grass early, muttering, "Ryan, you're cheating, come on, keep drinking." Dale, who helped him back to the room, looked at Ryan, who was a little drunk, with her beautiful eyes, as if she was studying where to start and how to make this guy lie down faster. Ryan, who was a little smug about his success in getting Kinzu drunk, felt uncomfortable under Dale's intriguing gaze. He smiled awkwardly and quickly slipped away. Eva, who was cleaning the kitchen in her room, saw her sister helping Kinzu in from outside. She quickly wiped her hands, ran over and helped Kinzu with her sister, and complained, "Uncle John is really a jerk. How could he let the boss drink so much?" Dale rolled her eyes helplessly and said unhappily, "How should I know? Hurry up and help this guy in. He's so heavy." The two helped Kinzu into the master bedroom. Eva also carefully helped Kinzu take off his shoes and socks. Dale rolled her eyes beside her. When did her sister learn to serve others? After helping Kinzu, the two girls went out. Just as Eva was about to close the door, she saw Daha carrying the arrogant little Jerry and Xiaohe, swaying up, obviously a little too much. Little Jerry was picked up from Daha in a funny way. I don't know what benefits this guy promised to Daha to make Daha drag him up obediently. Little Jerry was originally intoxicated in the pleasure of receiving his mount, but he was suddenly picked up and groaned in dissatisfaction. However, when he looked up and saw that it was someone following his master, he didn't dare to do anything rash and could only succumb to Eva's arms helplessly. Daha collapsed to the ground as soon as he was rescued from the sea of suffering. He was so tired that he couldn't eat too much next time. It was not worth it to sell himself for a grilled steak. Eva took the big husky back to the nest with a distressed look, and said with some self-blame, "Little guy, I'm so sorry. I was so busy today that I forgot to prepare food for you. I won't do it next time. Go to sleep obediently." After that, she picked up little Jerry's floppy ears and taught him a lesson. "And you, little Jerry, they are all smaller than you. Don't bully them in the future. Do you hear me?" Looking at the two huskies that were more than a circle bigger than him, little Jerry had the urge to cry. Is this the legendary stepmother's child? Early the next morning, Kinzu felt a little itchy in his nose, as if something had been rubbing against his face. He sneezed several times in a row and woke up from his sleep. He looked up in confusion and scared Kinzu. What appeared in front of Kinzu was little Jerry, who was also sleepy. Rubbing his head that was a little swollen after the hangover, Kinzu slowly sat up against the bed. He reached out and picked up little Jerry, who was still shaking his tail unconsciously. Kinzu stretched lazily, yawned and muttered, "How come you came to my bed? You can't let me sleep well so early in the morning." Little Jerry blinked his cute big eyes innocently. He didn't want to come, but was squeezed out by the two ungrateful little bastards, so he had no choice but to run to Kinzu's bed. Looking at the innocent eyes of little Jerry, Kinzu turned his head to look at the doghouse. With a poof, Kinzu couldn't help laughing. It turned out that the two brothers, Daha and Her, were lying in the doghouse in a big letter shape in order to squeeze the hateful little Jerry away. The two little guys were on each side, just filling up the oval doghouse. Kinzu tried to hold back his smile, and gently stroked little Jerry's head with his fingertips, and said jokingly, "What's wrong?" Our poor little Jerry was kicked out of the house. Nodding his head pitifully, little Jerry began to complain to Kinzu about the violence of the two brothers against him, and Eva's stepmother's partiality towards him. Anyway, little Jerry chatted for a long time, and Kinzu didn't understand a word, but seeing that he was really aggrieved, he hurried to comfort him. Before little Jerry was comforted here, the two brothers Daha who were woken up also ran under the bed, but they couldn't jump up as easily as little Jerry, and they kept whining anxiously below. Kinzu was so annoyed by their quarrels that he didn't care who was right or wrong. He slapped each guy on the butt and let them go to play by themselves. Poor little Hectares, he didn't understand what was going on, but he was slapped a few times for no reason. He was so aggrieved. Little Jerry, on the other hand, stopped pretending to be pitiful. He jumped off the bed, made a face at the two little guys, and ran out skipping all the way. Seeing the three little guys running out while playing, Kinzu shook his head helplessly and prepared to get up. Yesterday, he was a little irritable because of the mission, and he accepted all the toasts from the cowboys. He didn't expect that he would be drunk by those guys without paying attention. Thanks to the evil Studgen, Phoenixia and the Little Prince of the Southwest for their rewards and support. Thank you very much. Please recommend, collect and reward Chapter 106 Buying a Ship, Part 1. I looked at the time. It was only 7 in the morning. Rubbing his aching head, Kinzu walked into the bathroom and prepared to take a shower. But looking at himself, he was still wearing the same clothes as yesterday. He smelled the alcohol on his body. Kinzu covered his nose and muttered, "I really don't know how Jerry can stand this smell." He simply took off his clothes and threw them aside, and took a good shower in the bathroom. When Kinzu walked out of the bathroom wrapped in the bath towel, he was no longer the lazy look he had just woken up. Walking to the window, Kinzu opened the curtains with purple prints, letting the golden morning sun outside shine in. Stretching lazily, he sighed, "It's another sunny day, but I'm not in the mood to enjoy it." It was not until he opened several windows in the room and felt the fresh air blowing in that Kinzu felt that the air in the room was much better. After returning to the bed, Kinzu frowned and thought for a while. He took out his mobile phone and logged into Penguin. Seeing that his sister was on the line, he connected the video directly. "Hey, big landlord, why did you get up so early today?" Kinzu's elder sister Kinwan asked teasingly, looking at her brother wrapped in the big bath towel and leaning against the bed in the video. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu said weakly, "Didn't we recruit a few more cowboys yesterday? I couldn't sleep because of the guys who drank too much. By the way, sister, how is your business over there? You don't know how to control your drinking. Your brother-in-law here is considering opening a restaurant after a long time. Now those restaurants are doing very well. Your brother-in-law also wants to try it. What do you think?" Kinwan helplessly glared at the brother who changed the subject, and still answered honestly. "She is just a little teacher. It's okay for her to teach students, but she is really not good at doing business. It's better to listen to the opinions of this amazing brother." Kinzu thought for a long time before he said to his sister, "How about this, sister, there are not many upscale Western restaurants in the county now. I will give you some more money. You can ask your brother-in-law to find a larger construction company in the provincial capital and directly open a high-end Western restaurant." "Ah? How much will it cost? We're just a small county. Will anyone come to eat here?" Kinwan was shocked by her brother's generosity. If he did what he wanted, the 1 million yuan would not be enough. "It's okay, sister, just listen to me. I will transfer the money to you later. By the way, where are your mom and dad?" Kinzu once again showed his ability to change the subject, which made Kinwan on the opposite side laugh and cry. "Mom and dad are learning square dance with others in the community. Now they don't play mahjong much. You can't see them every morning and evening. They go to the community square to learn dancing with the aunt next door every day. Thinking of the recent changes in her parents and her family, Qinwan looked at her brother with gratitude. Without the endless farm work in the fields every day, her parents looked younger. Qinzu also smiled. He felt relieved that his parents were happy every day. However, since his parents were not around, and after chatting with his sister for a few more words, Qinzu found an excuse to hang up that video. After hanging up that video, Qinzu opened his mobile banking, thought about it, and transferred another $5 million to his sister's account. He didn't dare to transfer more, fearing that his family would have wild thoughts. But even so, $5 million was enough. Even if something happened to him, his family could live a stable life. Besides, even if something happened to him, these assets would still belong to the family, it would just be more troublesome. After doing all this, Qinzu finally breathed a sigh of relief. But after thinking about it, he still opened Penguin and sent a video invitation to Zumengyo. After 2 rings, the video was connected. The video was a bit noisy, as if it was in some lively place, but the camera was shaking, and Qinzu couldn't see it clearly. "Hey, Qinzu, what's wrong?" Zumengyo, who was on the other side of the video, looked at her good friend Surui's teasing eyes, and her pretty face turned red, making her look even more tender and tender. Nothing, I just wanted to ask when you'll come over." Qinzu was a little embarrassed at this moment. It turned out that Zumengyo was sitting in a Western restaurant that looked very good with a single ponytail at this moment. Through the video, Qinzu looked at Zumengyo's beautiful face that he hadn't seen for a few days, and his heart was a little warm. Because he saw Surui opposite Zumengyo through the reflection of the glass behind Zumengyo, and she could still answer his video when she was having dinner with others, which showed that he was still very important in her heart. "It's almost time, it's just a matter of 2 days, and I'll have a holiday the day after tomorrow." Zumengyo ignored Surui's expression on the opposite side, and said gently to the video. Qinzu was about to speak, but he saw the camera on the opposite side suddenly shook, and then another beautiful face appeared. She opened her red lips and said with a smile, "Hey, landlord, you only invited your little lover and forgot about my friend." "How could I forget, Miss Su? I thought that you lawyers are very busy on holidays, so I didn't invite you in person. How about you and Mengyo come together if you are not busy?" Qinzu laughed and said nonsense. How could he know when lawyers are busiest? It's just that he can't wait to be alone with Zumengyo, so how could he take the initiative to invite a light bulb to come? Surui pouted and looked at Qinzu, who looked nonchalant, and agreed very straightforwardly. Looking at Qinzu, who turned into a bitter face, Surui was secretly proud. "Little guy, you want to hide your little tricks from me, dreaming." Looking at Surui, who was smiling proudly like a fox stealing a chicken, Qinzu was so angry that his teeth were itching. "Okay, in that case, Rui and I will go there together in 2 days. You should get up early too." Zumengyo looked at Qinzu's depressed face and smiled to comfort him. "Okay, then I won't disturb you guys for dinner. See you in 2 days." Qinzu forced a smile, said goodbye to Zumengyo, and hung up that video. Since things have come to this, it has to be like this. Qinzu stood up from the bed, took out a grey casual suit from the closet, put on long boots, adjusted his clothes in front of the mirror, and went downstairs. As usual, Qinzu greeted Eva, who got up early and was busy. He looked at the 3 little creatures still chasing and playing in the living room, and asked in confusion, "Eva, what's wrong with them? They have been making noise since this morning and still haven't stopped." After helping Qinzu bring breakfast, Eva walked to their side and sat down and said with a smile, "I don't know what happened yesterday, but Daha actually carried little Jerry upstairs, so that's it." After saying that, Eva shrugged helplessly, stood up, picked up her cowboy hat and went out. She still had to go to Susie to see her. Thanks to Mr. Sitter for the 500 starting coins reward. Thank you. Chapter 107, Buying a Ship, Part 2. Looking at the guys running around in the living room, Qinzu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After calling out a few times and being ignored, he simply let them make a fuss. After finishing breakfast quickly and greeting the guys who were still playing, Qinzu picked up the cowboy hat hanging on the hanger and went out. As for the little guys, they could come or not. Seeing that the owner had left, Daha was getting a little anxious. Was there going to be no lunch again? The younger brother and Chiaha looked at each other for a few times, and then looked at the damn squirrel. The 3 little guys reached a brief truce agreement. Seeing Qinzu about to walk out the door, Daha chased after him with his short legs. Little Jerry squeaked disdainfully and jumped out from Daha's side flexibly. In Daha's somewhat dazed eyes, he jumped directly onto Qinzu's shoulder. Reaching out and stroking the proud little Jerry with his head raised, Kinzu smiled and waved to the second little one behind him, and led them to the stable. On the way to the stable, Kinzu thought for a while, took out his cell phone and called Will. "Hi, boss, good morning." As soon as the call was connected, Will's rough voice came through the microphone and clearly reached Kinzu's ears. "Well, good morning, Will, this is the case. Didn't we discuss buying a fishing boat yesterday? Do you have any familiar and reliable manufacturers?" "Well, I know a few good shipyards, but I only know a few maintenance workers there at most," Will said awkwardly. Kinzu understood what he meant, that is, he knew a few shipyards, but he didn't know whether they were reliable or not. "Okay, in that case, I'll ask my friends again." He hung up the phone helplessly. He also said that he would leave this matter to Will. He didn't want to go anywhere now, he just wanted to stay in the ranch safely. Who knows when the damn mission will start? He touched the Beret 92F in his arms. Although he loaded it with bullets when he went out in the morning, he still said that he didn't feel safe. "The power of this gun is too small. Damn it, I don't know what happened to the automatic weapons that Jennifer bought for me. If there is an Arkansas 47, no matter what mysterious force it is, I will give it a round first." Thinking of this, Kinzu couldn't help but take out his mobile phone and call Jennifer. At this time in New York, at the headquarters of American Express Bank, in the towering office building, the blonde foreign girl Jennifer, who had just started work, was sitting on the soft sofa and calling for coffee. Just after drinking the hot coffee, before she could swallow it, the mobile phone she carried with her, which needed to be on standby for 24 hours, rang. "Hey, Mr. Clean, good morning. I wonder if there is anything I can do for you." Jennifer was startled, looked at the number, hurriedly swallowed the coffee in her mouth, and answered the phone. "Jennifer, are you okay? I just want to ask when the automatic weapons that help me buy can be delivered." Kinzu heard that Jennifer on the other end of the phone seemed to be a little wrong, and asked in confusion. "I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Clean, for your concern. Mr. Clean, it's like this. We've already contacted them about the automatic weapons license. There should be good news in the next few days." Jennifer patted her magnificent chest and took a few deep breaths, so that her somewhat rapid breathing could be stabilized. Then she explained to Kinzu apologetically. "Oh, okay, that's it for now." After saying that, Kinzu hung up the phone without waiting for Jennifer on the other side to react. The blonde beauty was so angry that her just stable breathing became a little rapid again. Kinzu didn't have time to care about Jennifer's feelings now. He came to the stable and looked at Chiabai, who was snorting excitedly. He took out the carrots that Eva had washed early in the morning from the box next to it, put it flat in the palm of his hand and fed it directly. The carrots were all picked by Eva from the vegetable garden in the morning. As a result, Chiabai, this guy, never tasted other carrots since he ate the carrots grown in the vegetable garden. While it was chewing the carrot slowly, Kinzu started to brush it. Although he rarely rode it, he still had to wash it every day. After brushing Chiabai, Kinzu stroked the long horse face, smiled and patted it, and said, "Let's go, the master will take you out for a run today." After that, Kinzu took the saddle and sweatpant from the side and put them on the excited Chiabai. Wearing grey casual clothes, Kinzu rode the snow-white Chiabai, with the fiery red Jerry squatting on his shoulders, and slowly strolled on the green pasture. Looking up and looking around, Kinzu found that except for the small path from the main house to the stable, it was all half-man-high purple clover with small flowers. If you look closely, you can also find two small white figures under the half-man-high pasture. Who else could it be but the two idiots Daha and Xiaohe? Sitting on Xiaobai's back, looking at the rolling Appalachian mountains in the distance, Kinzu's mind was thinking about buying a boat. He gently pulled the reins to stop Xiaobai from running wildly, and made him walk slowly and obediently. Xiaobai snorted in dissatisfaction, but he still obeyed and slowed down. He took out his business card holder and flipped through it. He remembered the last time he attended a cocktail party in New York. Among the business cards he received, there seemed to be a guy named Douglas. According to his own introduction, he seemed to be a shareholder of a shipyard. After searching for a long time, Kinzu found a beautiful silver-plated business card in the slightly old-fashioned business card holder. In addition to the beautiful hollow pattern on the business card, there was only an English name and a string of numbers. Looking at this unusually beautiful business card, Kinzu hesitated for a moment. It should be him, right? No matter what, at most I can apologize if I made a wrong call. Kinzu gritted his teeth and dialed the number on the business card. What Qin didn't expect was that as soon as the call was connected, a questioning self-introduction came from the inside. "Hello, I'm Douglas, is this Qin?" "Yes, I'm Qin. I didn't expect Mr. Douglas would still remember me," Qin said with emotion. "No wonder he is successful. There is a reason for it." "Ha ha, of course I remember. How could I not remember such a young and promising billionaire?" At this time, in Beverly Hills, a landmark building in Los Angeles at the foot of Beverly Hills, Douglas, who had just got up, stood in the garden of his mansion and laughed heartily at the phone. He really remembered Qin, not for anything else, just because he was rich. People who work in shipyards like rich people the most. Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. Thanks. Chapter 108 Buying a Ship, Part 2. Qin smiled and said nothing. He also thought of the reason and could not help but admire these successful businessmen even more. He asked himself that he would definitely not remember a stranger he had only met once. After a few more polite words, Qin ended straight to the point and asked with a little doubt, "Mr. Douglas, I heard from Mr. Cook that you own a shipyard, right?" "Oh. Yes, what's the matter?" "Qin, do you need to buy a boat? A yacht or a cargo ship? I have them all here, and I guarantee that they are good quality and cheap, definitely much cheaper than you can buy them elsewhere." Douglas was immediately more energetic when he heard what Qin said. After realizing that there was business come in, he took a few quick steps. He came to the lounge chair in the garden and sat down, patting his chest and assuring Qin, "Well, it's like this, what I need is an air-shore fishing boat. As you know, I'm a fisherman and rancher." Qin said a little embarrassedly, but Douglas' words reminded him. "That's right, it's a yacht." Qin patted his head, a little annoyed that he didn't think of this. "What is a yacht?" "It's a muse for parties. Yachts are often equated with young models." "Is that so?" Douglas's enthusiasm was obviously not as high as before. "How much does a fishing boat cost? How much does it cost to be comparable to a yacht? The yachts here all start at millions. How about this, Mr. Qin, when are you free? I'll ask the salesman to go to your place and discuss the details. How about that?" Although a little disappointed, Douglas is a successful businessman after all. Of course, he will not let Qin feel a change in his mood. He is still enthusiastic about Qin and even specially asked the salesman to take the initiative to provide door-to-door service. Qin was overjoyed when he heard this, and he didn't care about his yacht dream anymore. He said quickly, "Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. It just so happens that I can't leave these days because of something." "Mr. Qin, you are too polite. These are what we should do. In this case, it's settled. I will ask the salesperson to go there tomorrow, no, today, and get things done as soon as possible." After hanging up the phone, Douglas leaned on the recliner and shook his head helplessly. He really couldn't understand why this Chinese Qin would leave a big city like Los Angeles and think of going to a small town where no one loves to be a rancher. Putting the phone back into his pocket, Qin's mood finally improved a little. He was still struggling. He was really worried about handing this matter over to Il. You know, although the money to buy a boat is nothing to him now, it is still a considerable amount for a cowboy. Now Douglas has helped him solve this problem. Qin was lazily lying in the sky garden basking in the sun just after lunch in the afternoon. Daha and her were playing around non-stop, either you scratch me or I bite you. In comparison, little Jerry was much more obedient, and was sleeping in Qin's arms. Just when Qin was drowsy from the warm sunshine, he was awakened by the ringing of his cell phone. He rubbed his eyes and put little Jerry, who looked at a loss, aside. He picked up the phone from the coffee table next to him and saw an unfamiliar number. Could it be that the salesman has arrived? Qin muttered to himself and picked up the phone. "Hello, I'm Qin. Who are you?" "Hello, Mr. Qin, I'm Albert from Duck Industries, and Mr. Douglas asked me to come here. I'm at Hill Manor now, is it convenient to go in directly?" Qin listened to the voice of the young man from the opposite side, and complained speechlessly. "Why don't you come in when you're at the door? Do you still need me to pick you up? Come in, just walk along the main road." "Okay, see you later." After hanging up the phone, Qin called Will again and asked him to come and take a look. After all, Qin knew nothing about these things, so he could only let people who really understood them come. He went downstairs and went to the bathroom to tidy up his appearance a little. After all, he was a billionaire, so he couldn't let people look down on him. After looking at himself in the mirror for a long time, Qin finally came to a conclusion. He looked so handsome again after not seeing him for a few days. Just after he came to the door after being narcissistic, he saw a black Audi slowly driving over in the distance. After stopping at the door of the villa, the passenger door was pushed open. A young white guy with short blonde hair and a handsome appearance walked down in a well-tailored suit. The guy first adjusted his tie, and then walked up quickly. When he came to Keen's U, Albert bowed and said, "Excuse me, is this Mr. Keen? I'm Albert from Duck Industries, and this is my business card." As he said that, Albert handed over a beautifully printed business card with both hands. Keen's U took the business card, which read Albert, sales manager of Duck Industries shipbuilding branch. After putting away the business card, Keen's U nodded and said, "Yes, I am Keen's U. Please come in, let's talk inside." Then he gestured to Albert to come in. "Mr. Keen, please go first, please go first," Albert said to Keen's U respectfully, waving his hand quickly. Keen's U was not polite, and turned back to the house directly, and led Albert to sit on the sofa in the living room. He asked politely, "Mr. Albert, would you like coffee or a drink?" "Just a cup of coffee, thank you." He waved his hand, signaling Eva, who heard the noise inside, to go and make coffee for both sides. After Eva made a cup of coffee for both of them, Keen's U looked at Albert and asked, "I wonder if Mr. Dub has told you about my requirements?" After taking a sip of coffee, Albert put down the cup, took out a document from the briefcase he carried with him, handed it to him, and said with a smile, "Mr. Keen, Mr. Dub has already said before coming that you need an offshore fishing boat. I brought all the information about our company's large and small fishing boats this time, and you can take your time to choose." Keen's U put down the coffee, reached out to take the folder, and after opening it, it was full of information about various fishing boats, from small fishing boats of 3 or 4 meters to large ocean-going fishing boats of 70 or 80 meters. Keen's U was a little dizzy after flipping through it. All he saw was some data and so on, which he seemed to understand but not quite. Keen's U closed the folder and put it aside. Looking at Albert's puzzled eyes, he explained with a smile, "I know nothing about these things. I have called a special person over. Let him take a look later. Thank you Fenxi for the reward and support. Thank you for your continued support. I wish you a happy Lantern Festival, and I also wish all book friends a happy Lantern Festival." Chapter 109 Take a day off. I finally had a day off today, but I was so tired from helping my relatives move, and I had to work overtime in the evening. I took a day off today and will make up for it tomorrow. Thank you for your support, fellow readers. Chapter 110 In short trawlers. Albert was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Keen's U, a fishery owner, didn't know anything about fishing boats. How could he know that even now, Keen's U only knew how to fish? He had never seen a fish, let alone a fishing boat. At most, he had seen photos of it on TV. "Mr. Keen, do you need me to introduce these fishing boats to you?" Albert looked at Keen's U and asked uncertainly. "Can I? Will it be too much trouble for Mr. Albert?" Keen's U paused while drinking coffee, put down the cup, and said with interest. Seeing Keen's U's reaction, Albert's nervous mood suddenly relaxed. He was really worried that Keen's U was not interested in these things, which would be embarrassing. He waved his hand and said, "Mr. Keen is too polite. Our general manager Duck called us this morning and asked us to treat you well. What's the big deal about this little thing?" "General manager? Are you talking about Mr. Doug, the general manager of your shipyard?" Keen's U was a little surprised. He thought Doug was just a small shareholder. "No." Keen's U just breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Albert continue respectfully. "Mr. Douglas, he is the general manager of our Duck Industrial Group." Keen's U was speechless. His complacent mood suddenly fell to the bottom. He remembered that Douglas' age should not be much older than his. But look at him now. He is also a shareholder of Pingo. Maybe his shares are higher than his. And he is the general manager of Duck Industrial. Although I don't know how big Duck Industrial is, just a shipyard should be worth a lot. But look at yourself now. In addition to the Pingo shares that he didn't plan to touch, there is only a ranch that can be sold. "Mr. Keen, can I start?" Albert didn't know how complicated Keen's U's mood was now. Looking at Keen's U, who was a little dazed, he asked. Albert's voice interrupted Keen's U's meditation. Looking up at the inquiring eyes, Keen's U nodded, sorted out his mood, and prepared to listen to Albert's introduction. His concern for fishing boats has become more urgent. Without picking up the folder that Keen's U had put aside, Albert crossed his fingers on his legs and began to talk. "Mr. Keen, let's not talk about freshwater fishing boats, let's talk about ocean fishing boats. Looking at Kinzu, he nodded. Albert continued, for ocean fishing vessels, they are divided into trawlers and purse-sent fishing vessels according to different operation methods. And by size, they are roughly divided into 3 types, namely coastal, nearshore and ocean-going. Generally, trawlers under 20 meters are difficult to meet the requirements of offshore navigation operations from the perspective of endurance, stability, speed, oil tanks, fish tank capacity, fishing, refrigeration, and layout of electromechanical equipment. It can be said that it is unrealistic for 20 meters fishing vessels to operate in the sea. There is little oil and fish, and the endurance and tank capacity are limited, so there is no economic benefit. The operating area of fishing vessels of this size is generally along the coast or inland rivers, and they work and return on the same day. If it is 20 to 45 meters, it can run a little farther, and the time it takes is also longer. It needs to return for replenishment at least once every 3 to 6 months. Generally, ocean-going fishing vessels are above 45 meters. As for the material of fishing boats, they are also divided into wood, steel, fiberglass and aluminum alloy. There are also motorized, sailing, and manual propulsion methods, which can be said to be different. While drinking coffee, Kinzu listened to Albert Sendley's introduction, from the material and power of the fishing boat to the trawl net. Kinzu didn't expect that this young white guy knew a lot. He was very good at chatting, and he was respectful and flattering everywhere, but he didn't make you feel that he was fake. Nodding, Kinzu unconsciously agreed, and sighed in his heart that he was worthy at being a sales manager at such a young age. After chatting for a while, he heard the sound of the door opening outside. "Will, the boss is waiting for you in the living room." Looking at the old fisherman Will who pushed the door in, Eva said politely, "Okay, thank you." After thanking the woman next to the boss, Will took off his cowboy hat and walked towards the living room. Looking at Will who came in, Kinzu nodded at him. It seemed that the old fisherman was also very concerned about this matter. The weather today was not too hot. But now Will, who took off his cowboy hat, was slightly sweaty on his head. Motioning Will to sit on the sofa next to him, Kinzu pointed at Albert opposite and introduced him. "This is Mr. Albert from Dutch Shipyard." He pointed at Will and introduced him to Albert. "This is my future captain, Will Anderson." Will heard Kinzu's introduction and quickly stood up and shook hands with Albert. He had heard of this shipyard, which is a very old shipyard in New York. Seeing the two of them greet each other, Kinzu handed over the folder on the coffee table and said with a smile, "Will, come and see what kind of fishing boat we need. There are so many models that my eyes are dazzled." Will took the folder and read it without being polite to Kinzu. He also knew that his boss didn't know much about these things, but he liked this point of his boss. He didn't know if he didn't know, and he didn't pretend to know. You know, making a living on the sea is not an easy thing. It's really not a pleasant thing to meet a boss who gives orders randomly. "Boss, our fishery now only needs to buy an offshore trawler, and this one is good." Will pointed to a fishing boat style on the folder and turned to Kinzu and said. Kinzu leaned over and found that Will had chosen a 48-meter-long fishing boat. "Mr. Clean, the standard material of this offshore fishing boat is ferrous cement. It is 48 meters long and equipped with 3 engines. The towing force is definitely enough." Albert looked at the fishing boat that Will had chosen and added that he now admired this big guy. This boat was definitely a big one among the offshore fishing boats. "What about the price?" "That depends on what configuration and hull material Mr. Keen chooses. If it is this kind of ferrous cement, after equipping you with all the best accessories, the price of the whole ship will be about $500,000 US. Kinzu nodded. "It's not very expensive." But from what Albert said, is there any other material for this ship? He looked at this guy in confusion. The meaning was very clear. "Keep introducing it." He was very interested in listening. "Thank you for the reward support from the evil Studgen. I'm also very happy to see the good and evil side of God again. Thank you for your support. Yesterday was supposed to be a day off, but I helped my relatives move all day, and then went to the mall to help the company dismantle the exhibition hall in the evening. I worked as a laborer until 4 in the morning. I continued to work in the afternoon until 9 in the evening. Now I feel like my arms and legs are not my own. So today I can only continue to update once. I will owe it first. Liuun will make up for it. Thank you for your support." "Thank you." Chapter 111 Deki no 1. Seeing Kinzu's expectant look, Albert explained with a smile. "Mr. Clean, the material of this boat can be made of fiberglass or aluminum alloy. In that case, the price may be a little more expensive. but the quality is definitely much better than that of ferrocement mesh. The protection of fiberglass is stronger than that of aluminum alloy, and it is extremely corrosion resistant. The appearance is also much more beautiful than steel. Look at the back, there is a boat made of fiberglass. As he said that, Albert flicked a few pages of the folder to the back, and suddenly a pure white fishing boat appeared in front of Kinzu. Mr. Clean, this is a fishing boat that is a little bigger than the previous one. It is 51 meters long and has reached the standard of a distant water fishing boat. However, because the oil depot is designed to be a little smaller, and it has just reached the standard of a distant water fishing boat, the engineers have classified it as a nearshore fishing boat. Listening to Albert's introduction, Kinzu looked at the picture in front of him. The picture showed a fishing boat that had not yet been launched. It was painted red on the base and pure white, with a beautiful appearance like a destroyer, and a sharp go. Well, it's very good. Will, what do you think? Boss, in fact, we can use ordinary steel wire cement material. If not, aluminum alloy is also okay. I also know that this fiberglass is 2 or 3 times more expensive. Will said hesitantly. He really thought that steel wire cement mesh was enough. This is not a yacht, why should it be so beautiful? If it really doesn't work, aluminum alloy is also good. Compared with steel wire cement fishing boats, aluminum alloy is very good. Unlike steel mesh concrete, which is heavy, slow to run, and easy to flip. Aluminum alloy fishing boats have met all the needs of offshore fishing boats. And at this price, you can buy 2 aluminum alloy boats. Then order this one. I believe Mr. Albert will not cheat me in terms of price, right? Kinzu looked at Albert with a smile after listening to Will's words and made a decision. Of course, of course. The price is definitely the best for you. The total price is $1.1 million, and the sonar, satellite, computer and engine on the ship, as well as the trawl net and gallows, are all installed for you. And this boat can accommodate 3 rooms and a living room. We will replace all your things with leather. The bed and sofa are all branded, and the central air conditioner is also branded. Albert said so much in one breath, and his mouth was a little dry. He took a sip of coffee and felt his throat better. He put down the coffee cup and looked at Kinzu with some expectation. Although the price he offered this time was not the lowest, it was much cheaper than the fishing boats on the market. After all, Mr. Dub had told him when he called today that this was not a profitable relationship, but this customer had to be maintained. Kinzu looked at Will after hearing this. Will leaned forward and leaned over, and said in a surprised voice, Boss, this price is very fair, even a little cheap. Kinzu nodded with satisfaction after hearing this. Regardless of the price, at least Albert's attitude made him very satisfied. Okay, then it's settled. I wonder when this boat can arrive at my fishing ground. Kinzu looked at Albert, who was looking forward to it, and gave him a positive answer. But he still cared about when he could get the boat. Albert thought for a while, flipped through his briefcase again, and finally gritted his teeth and said, Mr. Clean, this boat just happened to be built in our factory. I can make the decision and give it to you first. After I go back, I will have someone replace some of the equipment and decorations on it. It will only take a week at most, and you can pick up the boat, or we can send it to you. Looking at Albert in surprise, he thought it would take several months. Nodding, Kinzu said, in this case, then I thank Mr. Albert. Now Kinzu's favorability towards Albert and Douglas has risen sharply. Kinzu has not met many people who care about him so much. He has decided that all his boats in the future will be bought at Doug's house. Seeing Kinzu's satisfied look, Albert breathed a sigh of relief. This mission was finally almost completed. At this time, Albert was shouting in his heart, it is really not easy to develop a wealthy customer now. But thinking of the newly built fishing boat, he was approved to Kinzu just like this. Albert had a headache looking at the documents in his hand. He shook his head and said, forget it. I don't want to think about it anymore. At most, I can explain it to Albert and say that there is something wrong with the machine. Kinzu wrote a check for $1.1 million to Albert. Kinzu thought about it and said that he would definitely go to New York next week, so he said, then I look forward to seeing my beloved boat next week. I will pick it up myself then. Nodding, Albert suddenly thought of something and asked, Mr. Clean, what name do you need for your beloved boat? Name? Kinzu touched his chin and began to think about it. What name should he give it? Dreamer? Wouldn't this name be a bit out of place for a fishery? After thinking for a while, Kinzu made up his mind and said, in this case, let's call it Dekino. 1. He had already decided to change the name of the manor this time. It would be called Tycoon Manor in the future. He had been here for so long and he had to make his own voice. Albert took out the note he brought with him and asked Kinzu to write his name on the paper. Then he solemnly put the note and the check back into the briefcase. He stood up and said, "Mr. Keen, since the matter has been settled, I will not disturb you anymore. I will take my leave now." Kinzu looked at the time. More than 2 hours had passed without him noticing. He politely asked, "Mr. Albert, why don't you have dinner here before going back?" "No, thank you, Mr. Keen. I have to rush back to New York early today. There are still many things waiting for me at the shipyard." "Okay, in that case, I won't keep Mr. Albert. See you in a week." Kinzu smiled. That's right. After all, he is a sales manager of a shipyard. He can't compare with an idle person like himself. It's not easy for him to come here in person this time, so he didn't try to keep him. After sending Albert to the car with Kinzu, Will looked at the sky and said, "Boss, in that case, I'll go get busy first. The dock hasn't been cleared yet." Since things have been settled, Will stood up and prepared to leave. He had to clean up the old dock quickly. There is no new dock now, and the boat will definitely stop at the fishing ground when it arrives. Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. I wish all the book friends a happy Valentine's Day. I guess everyone is happy now. Paul Yun is still typing hard. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 112 An Ominous Premonition. Well, okay, then you go and get busy. You'll have to work hard these 2 days. The new dock has not been built yet, so just make do at the old dock. Nodding, Kinzu signaled Will that he could go back first. Although a new boat was ordered today. But he really didn't feel like building a new dock right now, so he could only do this for now. Turning back and going into the house, Kinzu picked up his phone, found John's number, and dialed it. After a while, the sound of D horse hooves came from outside. Kinzu knew without looking that it must be John who arrived. Sure enough, not long after, John pushed the door and walked in. Looking at Kinzu sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed, he asked with some confusion, "Boss, what do you want to talk to me about?" "Well, come on, sit down and talk." After John sat down on the sofa, Kinzu considered it for a while and said, "It's like this, I plan to change the name of the manor to Tycoon Manor. You can find a few people to do it later." After hearing this, John sighed slightly in his heart. This day has finally come. As early as when the ranch just changed its owner, he knew that the hill manor that had been called for decades would no longer exist. "Well, okay, I get it." Seeing John agree so straightforwardly, Kinzu was relieved. After all, this name has been used for decades, and he was really worried that John would have some emotions, and then there would inevitably be some unnecessary embarrassment between the two. "But, boss, should this name be in both Chinese and English? If it is in Chinese, this plot may not be available in Revere. Moreover, if the name is changed, it must be registered at the city hall. Some road signs must be replaced." John hesitated, still looked at Kinzu, and raised some very critical questions. "Well, for this plaque, it should be bilingual. If Revere can't get the Chinese one, I will go to Boston to have a look." Scratching his aching head, Kinzu didn't expect that changing the name would be so troublesome. "As for backup and so on, you can go and run it when you have time. I don't have time to go out these days." He looked at Kinzu with some surprise. "You don't have time? How can you be idle at home every day without time?" Although he complained in his heart, John still took on the task readily and said that he would do it tomorrow. After John left, Kinzu sat quietly on the sofa in a daze. There was no light on in the living room, which seemed a little dim. Sitting alone for a while, he became more and more irritated. Kinzu got up and took out a pack of Marlboro that David brought when he came from the locker next to him. He opened the package and took out a pack from it and opened it. Kinzu sat back on the sofa, took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a deep breath. When the cigarette went around from his lungs and came back, Kinzu blew out a large puff of smoke from his nose. Looking at the eye circles that lingered in the air for a long time, Kinzu's mood was slightly relaxed. He used to smoke, but later he saw too many advertisements about smoking and quit. He took another deep breath, and when he was about to spit it out, an ashtray suddenly came over. Kinzu, who was not mentally prepared, was startled and coughed non-stop. Ahem, Eva, how come you walk without making any sound? Kinzu coughed as Eva handed him a delicate glass ashtray. You're thinking too seriously, aren't you? Clean, what happened? Looking at the panicked Kinzu, Eva shrugged and asked with some concern. Sitting back on the sofa, Kinzu flicked the ash in the delicate ashtray. Sighing, avoiding Eva's questioning, he asked, Eva, where's your sister? Why don't I see her? She should be in the gym now. Do you have something to do with her? I'll go call her. Since Kinzu was not going to say anything, Eva was smart enough not to continue asking, but got up and walked towards the gym behind. Hey. Sighing deeply, Kinzu put out the cigarette butt in the ashtray and lay back weakly on the soft leather sofa. He picked up Daha, who was snoring on the sofa, and put it in his arms. Daha, who was in a daze, was suddenly disturbed from his sweet dream, and hummed a little unhappy. He opened his somewhat dazed eyes, and when he saw that it was Kinzu, he yawned again, found a comfortable position and continued to sleep. On the other side, Xiaohe, who was sleeping soundly leaning on Daha, suddenly had no support. He arched his head in dissatisfaction until he found a soft backrest on the other side, and then he continued to sleep. Hey, Clean, what's wrong? I heard from Eva that you are not in a good condition. Accompanied by a slight sound of footsteps, Dale's pleasant voice rang beside Kinzu. Turning his head gently, Kinzu looked at Dale's graceful body wrapped in a tight casual outfit. But he couldn't muster the interest in wanting to see the scenery inside as before. Sighing listlessly again, Kinzu saw that Eva did not follow him, and motioned Dale to sit down next to him. Dale looked at Kinzu, who looked a little haggard, and was very curious. Since she met this mysterious oriental boss, she had never seen him so decadent. Eva followed Kinzu's instructions and sat down next to him. While wiping the sweat from her forehead, she waited curiously for the next words. After exercising for a while, she felt that her skills had deteriorated a little. It's like this, I may be targeted by someone, and I may be in danger at any time. Smelling that fragrance emanating from that beauty who was so close, Kinzu said to Dale weakly. What? Suddenly, Dale didn't even bother to wipe the sweat from her head and exclaimed. She stood up in surprise. You heard it right, I was targeted by someone, and it's very dangerous. Then, Clean, where did you know this news? Do you know who the other party is? Why did they target you? Is it for money? Eva stared at Kinzu seriously and asked seriously. How would I know who it is? This is news from a friend of mine in Boston. They say that a certain force has been looking for me recently, and they seem to have found out everything in the past 2 days, so I should be careful. This news is very reliable. At the end, Kinzu was afraid that Dale would not believe it, so he emphasized his tone and seemed very serious. His eyelids have been twitching today, and he had a bad feeling, so he planned to let Dale know something, so that with her protecting him, there should be no problem. After frowning and thinking for a long time, Dale's eyes gradually changed. They became sharper and more murderous. Thank you Fengzi for your reward and support, thank you. Chapter 113 Rehiring Seeking Recommendation and Reward. Looking up at Kinzu, Dale gnashed her teeth and said, Clean, I think I know who it is. Who is it? Kinzu looked at Dale in surprise. He himself had no idea, so how could Dale know? Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to his mind, and Kinzu exclaimed, You mean, Mad Dog? Gritting his teeth and nodding, Dale's slender and white fists were still clenched tightly, and there was no sign of the explosive power contained in them. But, isn't he in prison? Kinzu still couldn't figure it out. Seeing Kinzu still a little confused, Dale said unhappily, Can't there be someone behind him? Don't you Chinese have an old saying? Beat the young ones, and the old ones will come. But this is better. I was worried that I couldn't find them. It was because of these bastards that I had to retire early. Kinzu nodded with some shame. He found that he had made a serious mistake. He had always regarded the group of people like Mad Dog as some idle hooligans, but he didn't think that if they were just hooligans, where would they get the money to open a casino? Thinking of this, Kinzu suddenly figured out the key to the matter. No matter what the reason was, he sent someone to prison, and it was normal for the people behind him to retaliate against him. Dale, if it's them, then we are really in danger. Since they have investigated me and dared to come, it means that they have been fully prepared. Kinzu said to Dale next to him with some worry. It has been so many days since the incident, and they are only here now, so they must have done some research on me. If so, the scene will definitely not be too small. And I will be in great danger. After all, if I am not killed, who can afford the revenge of a billionaire afterwards, right? Dale frowned a little when she heard this. She didn't care about it herself, but she was afraid that if there was a conflict at the time, if there were too many people, the scene would be chaotic, and she would definitely not be able to take care of Kinzu alone. What if he was hurt? Clean, why don't you call Uncle John over, and bring a few cowboys over, and everyone will live in the villa for the next few days, just in case. Then? Kinzu hesitated a little. Except for Dale, he didn't trust anyone else. What if there was a traitor or something? Wouldn't his life be over? Boss, don't worry, Uncle John can definitely be trusted. Seeing Kinzu's worry, Dale said comfortingly. But she didn't say too much. Except for John, she was not very sure about the other cowboys. Kinzu thought for a long time, sorted out the whole thing from beginning to end, and suddenly found that things were not so bad. The other party must not know that he now knows their purpose. If he does not leave the ranch, they may directly attack the villa due to the limitation of the mission. And he only needs to stay in the villa with peace of mind, and find a few bodyguards to come over, so that he can deal with all kinds of changes. He really doesn't believe it. Unless the other party directly pushes the villa with missiles, he will definitely pass this mission. Thinking of this, Kinzu suddenly became energetic, and regardless of Dale's strange look, he picked up the phone and dialed the number left by Blackwater when rescuing Eva last time. Hello, Mr. Clean, I am very happy to serve you again. Is there anything I can help you with? As soon as the phone was connected, the voice from inside made Kinzu stunned. No way, this guy actually still remembers his phone number? But there is no need to say so much now, so he went straight to the point. Yes, ma'am, I need bodyguards now, the kind with weapons. I may be in some trouble now. Okay, sir, where are you now? How many bodyguards do you need? What level? Same as last time, the best, let them come directly to my ranch now. Kinzu paused, thought about it, and added, but there is no need for mercenaries this time. It's not easy to explain in my own home. Okay, is Mr. King's mission urgent this time? How long do you need to hire him? He looked at the sky and there was still a little sun outside, so he said, it would be best to get to the ranch tonight and not make too much noise. As for the time, let's hire him for a week first. Okay, I understand. A team of elite bodyguards will set off in an hour and arrive at the destination in 2 hours. Because it is a temporary mission, the cost of hiring him for 1 week is $100,000. Well, okay, I'll let Jennifer transfer the money to you. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu looked at Dale on the other side and shrugged. Isn't this good? Call John over. The 4 of us will be together and let the bodyguards handle it. Patting his forehead, Dale once again had a deep understanding of Kinzu's rich style. Just for an uncertain news, he directly threw $100,000 to hire a private bodyguard. No one else can do this. Let Dale go and call John, and explain the matter to him and Eva. Kinzu continued to pick up the rich gold and started to get busy. Jennifer, who was just about to get off work, looked at the number displayed on her mobile phone and smiled helplessly. There was nothing she could do. This kind of work is like this, there is no distinction between work and off work. After adjusting her mood, Jennifer answered the phone with a smile. Hello, Mr. Clean, how can I help you? Well, transfer $100,000 to the Blackwater people for me, transfer it now. Hearing the male voice coming from the phone, Jennifer's expression froze, and she asked anxiously, Mr. Clean, are you okay? Haven't you dealt with the last matter yet? On the other end of the phone, Kinzu's heart was slightly warmed. Although he knew that the other party cared about him so much because he was a big customer, he still appreciated this favor. After briefly explaining the matter, Jennifer thought for a while and suggested, Mr. Clean, don't blame me for being nosy. You'd better communicate with your private lawyer about this matter. Kinzu pondered for a while. This matter really needs to be communicated with David, otherwise it will be troublesome if David can't react afterwards. Thank you, Miss Jennifer, for your reminder. This matter really needs to be communicated with him. It seems that I still haven't adapted to the living habits of an American rich man. Kinzu smiled and teased himself. Mr. Clean, you're joking. You just didn't react for a moment. If there is nothing else, I won't bother you. I will transfer the money to Haishu now. Jennifer was relieved when she heard the laughter coming from the other end of the phone. Now she is still in the mood to laugh. It seems that things are not too bad. Thanks to Moshang Dengado, this name also has a lot of rewards and support. Thank you for your support. Liu-un will work harder. Chapter 114 Holman arrives. After hanging up Jennifer's phone, Kinsey looked at the two sisters who were still whispering in the living room, and called David again. At this time, on the streets of New York, David, who had just got off work, was leisurely driving his BMW 750 to his home. Just as he was waiting for the red light at an intersection, the phone in his back suddenly rang. After he finished listening to Kinsey's narration, his originally smiling expression suddenly froze there. What? Fuck. How dare they do this? Clean, can you confirm this news? Listening to David's somewhat incredible exclamation on the other end of the phone, Kinsey said helplessly, I am very sure of this news, although I don't know why they dare to target me. But I am in trouble this time. Fuck, these sons of bitches. Clean, don't worry, I will call the Boston Police Department right away. I believe they will definitely send police to protect you. David was obviously a little furious at this time, and he was also a little worried about Kinsey's safety. The first thing he thought of was to use Kinsey's identity to put pressure on the police station. No, David, there is no evidence now, and this will alert the enemy. Let's see the situation first. I have already asked a pair of Blackwater bodyguards to come to my ranch quietly. I will stay at the ranch and not go anywhere these days. Kinsey said to David on the other end of the phone with some distress. This feeling of the enemy in the dark and me in the light is really unpleasant. After thinking for a long time, until countless car horns sounded behind his car, David started the car and said to the headset, this is also a way. As long as they dare to enter your ranch, it will be easy to deal with later. Then we can give a big gift to those sons of bitches in the Boston Police Department who take taxpayers' money and do nothing. After driving the car to the side and stopping, David handed his driver's license and ID card to the traffic police who came over, and consciously opened his wallet. After the traffic police issued the ticket, he honestly took out the US dollars and handed it over. After sending the traffic police away, David said to the headset with some worry, Clean, you have to be more careful in this case. It's best not to show up. If not, hire more bodyguards. Anyway, you are not short of money. I'm fine here. I'll just wait for the bodyguards to arrive at night. The key is you. We must teach them a lesson this time. Don't worry, Clean, as long as they dare to attack your ranch. I promise that there will be no place for them in the whole of Europe. David seemed to be gritting his teeth when he said this. Regardless of Mr. Hill's instructions to take care of Kinsey, this is simply destroying his rice bowl. It's not so easy to find a private lawyer for such a rich man. What's more, Mr. Hill also asked him to take care of Kinsey. Is this how he took care of him? After hanging up David's phone, Kinsey's mood was completely calm. I won't go out these 2 days, and Dale will follow me wherever I go. I don't believe that I can't complete this crap task. Think about Nigger's strength, which is almost half of what it is now. By then, I should be able to learn more powerful fighting skills. While thinking about things, Kinsey heard the sound of a door opening behind him. He turned around and was startled by John's outfit. John, are you going to war? Kinsey asked, scratching his head as he looked at John's fully armed appearance. John in front of him had a Remington 750 slung across his shoulder and a revolver of unknown model on his waist. It was nothing, but he even brought a gun belt. Looking at the rows of yellow-orange bullets, Kinsey was speechless. Boss, I heard that someone wants to take advantage of you. Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, I will never let you get hurt. Seeing John patting his chest with an excited look, Kinsey felt warm in his heart. Although he didn't know whether what he said was true or not, at least his performance now made Kinsey very satisfied. Without saying much, Kinsey walked over and hugged this white old man in his 50s. After a while, Kinsey asked John to put his gun aside, and they sat down on the sofa together. Looking at John, who was still a little excited, he asked, the cowboys don't know about this, right? Well, I didn't tell them. I told Susie that you had something to do with me and might go into the mountains at night, so I came with a gun. John calmed down a little and then spoke. He really hated the group of people like Mad Dog. Nodding, Kinsey didn't expect that John's excuse was quite good. Now that he took out the gun and didn't go back at night, no one would suspect anything. Boss, don't worry, we will protect you. Eva next to him looked at Kinsey's expression and comforted him. You should just cook honestly. Your sister is enough. Kinsey shook his head with a smile and teased Eva. Ignoring Eva, who was hit by himself, Kinsey looked at Dale and John. He said, okay, everyone, relax. It's nothing serious. I've already hired a personal bodyguard. He will be here soon. We don't need to do anything. Boss, don't worry. As long as you don't leave us, it won't help no matter how many of them come. Dale said unconvincedly. She was obviously dissatisfied that she couldn't teach those people a lesson in person. Ignoring Dale's little complaint, Kinzu looked at Eva, who was a little dejected, and said, Eva, prepare more food in the evening. They will probably come with 10 people. I'll trouble you for the next 2 days. Okay, I know, I'll go right away. Eva responded listlessly and walked towards the kitchen helplessly. To be honest, she really had no interest in the promising career of a cook. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Kinzu received a familiar call. Hello, Mr. Clean. This is Holman. We are now near the ranch. It seems that someone is watching nearby. When it gets darker, we will go in from another place. Kinzu finally reacted after hearing the familiar voice. He quickly said, Okay, Holman, don't alarm those people first, just come in quietly. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu looked at the people on the sofa and said, The bodyguards have arrived outside the ranch, and they've discovered that there are people stalking nearby. So they really might attack the ranch? Don't they want to live? Dale still couldn't believe that there would be such a fearless person. Apart from anything else, just attacking the residence of a billionaire is enough to make the wealthy circles in the United States and even the whole of Europe hostile. Thank you Fenxi for your reward and support. Regarding some book friends saying that the protagonist's personality is too idiotic, I want to know what aspect they are talking about. Chapter 115 Prelude. Kinzu smiled bitterly and shook his head. Perhaps they themselves were not brave enough. But who made him have such a pit system? They dared not to come. Kinzu guessed correctly. Edward Harvey was bitter at this moment. He had just received a call from his boss Kevin Dupont. He had to get rid of the Chinese man today. After the matter was done, he would be given $1 million to run away. Although Dupont's words on the phone were so tempting, Harvey sighed helplessly. 1 million seemed a lot, but how could it be so easy to get? Think about it. Last time, in order to save someone, that guy directly hired Blackwater mercenaries. If it was not solved in time this time, when the Blackwater people arrived, I don't know how many of them can come back alive. And he knew very well that even if he came back alive tonight, tomorrow, no, there was no need to wait until tomorrow. Maybe as soon as he left, his affairs would spread throughout the American rich world. At the time, he would probably have no way to survive in the whole of Europe. But think about his elderly father and mother in Boston. Harvey looked at Kinzu's blurred face on the newspaper in front of him, and finally made up his mind that in order to protect them from being hurt, he must deal with this Chinese man beautifully tonight. Boss, what are you worried about? He's just a Chinese. Although it's a small amount of money, didn't Dupont promise to send us abroad? The ship has been contacted. And there is $1 million, that's 1 million. Harvey came back to his senses after listening to the obviously excited voice of his younger brother next to him. He glared at him fiercely and cursed, Fuck, have you never seen money before? Is it so easy to get this money? Hurry up and pack your things. If anything goes wrong today, you'll go to hell to accompany your gambling father. At this time, a younger brother hurried over. After seeing Harvey, he stopped and said, Boss, the brother who was stalking in front has sent news again. The target is still in the ranch and there is no movement. Yeah, Harvey hummed lightly after hearing this, slowly turned his head and looked at the dozen brothers around him, and said loudly, Everyone knows today's mission. Boss Dupont said that after the matter is completed, he will arrange for everyone to go abroad, each with $100,000, which is enough for everyone to have fun for a while. Listening to the cheers from all around, Harvey smiled with satisfaction, then waved his hand and said imposingly, Take your stuff and set off. At this time, the sky had completely darkened, and the moon like a scimitar slowly climbed up the branches. Let the ranch, which was originally pitch dark in the night, have a little light. Buzz under the hazy moonlight, 2 cars without lights on and whose brands could not be seen clearly were driving carefully on the ranch path with the weak moonlight. Kinzu listened to the faint roar of the car engine in the distance, knowing that it might be Holman. Sure enough, not long after, the sound of the car engine gradually became clearer and closer. With the sound of 2 brakes, the engine sound disappeared. Ding dong. Ding dong. Hearing the doorbell ring, John, who was sitting next to him, picked up the remote and ran to open the door without waiting for Kinzu to speak. Seeing John so active, Kinzu signaled Dale, who had just stood up, to sit down again. This was also good, John had seen Holman before, so there would be no misunderstanding. John came to the door and first carefully looked outside through the cat's eye. With the bright light outside the villa, he saw the person clearly, and it was indeed Holman. Nodding at Keen's view, John put the Remington on his back and opened the door. "Hello, is this Mr. John?" Holman looked at the old white man who opened the door and felt that he looked familiar. After thinking for a while, he remembered who he was. However, looking at his fully armed outfit, he frowned and said, "Mr. John, is the situation so serious?" "No, I'm just worried about the boss. The situation is not that bad." With an awkward smile, John quickly explained that he didn't want the other party to take the opportunity to raise the price because of his outfit. As if he saw John's little thoughts, Holman relaxed his serious expression and wanted to say something, but still didn't say it. "Please come in and talk." Patting his head, John quickly made way and invited the other party to enter the room. Nodding and waving his hand behind him, Holman came in with a group of big men in black suits. Seeing Keen's who had just stood up from the sofa, he quickly took a few steps and stretched out his right hand and said, "Hello, Mr. Keen." Keen's smiled and shook hands with him, motioned the others to sit down, and asked, "What's the situation outside?" "Fortunately, there are only 2 stalkers, and they are very unprofessional. They should be just ordinary hooligans." "That's good. The information I got should be just ordinary local thugs. Since you're here, the safety of this villa will be handed over to you." Keen's looked at Holman with a serious face and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Mr. Keen, since we have accepted this mission, we will definitely protect Mr. Keen's safety." Holman still had the serious expression, as if he was born unable to smile. Glue. At this time, Keen's stomach did make an inappropriate sound. Keen's smiled awkwardly and said, "I didn't eat much at noon today because of this matter. Now I'm really hungry. Let's go and have a meal together. I've prepared it for you. Everyone, just eat something. Mr. Keen, you guys eat first. Let's get familiar with the environment first." Holman stood up and said politely. Then he looked at the huge space in the villa and asked, "What are the places that cannot be entered here? Mr. Keen should tell us clearly first." Stopping the action of turning around, Keen's smiled and said, "In this case, let's eat first. You can look around the villa. We just moved here. There is nothing that cannot be entered." "That's good. Then Mr. Keen, you guys take your time to eat, and we'll just walk around." After speaking, he waved his hand, and the 9 men in suits sitting on the sofa stood up and scattered to observe the environment. 2 of them even ran outside the house to walk around. With the bright light, the inside and outside of the villa can be seen clearly. After a circle, they came back. A few people were mumbling about who was in charge here and who was in charge there. Keen's was bored anyway, so he took Dale and John to the restaurant to eat first. Thanks to Moshang Dengyu and Fengzi for their support. Thank you. Chapter 116 Night Attack. When Keen's and his friends finished eating and came out, Holman and his friends were still busy. Keen's looked at Holman who was talking to his subordinates and said, "I'll leave this to you. We'll go upstairs first. The restaurant has left food for you." "Okay, Mr. Keen, you can rest assured. We're here and we'll never let anyone threaten you." Keen's nodded at him, saying that he was very confident in them. He picked up Daha and Xiaohe who were woken up, asked Eva to hold little Jerry, and went upstairs with a few people. When they got upstairs, Keen's raised his hand and pointed to a room opposite and said to John who was following behind him, "John, you can stay here for today. It's been cleaned up." "Okay, boss." John nodded indifferently and went into the room with his Remington. Keen's said goodnight to the 2 girls and walked into the room, but just in case, the door was not locked. After putting the little guys in their nests, Keen's entered the bathroom to take a shower. He came out and lay on the bed, but he couldn't sleep for a while. The ranch at night seemed particularly quiet. Holman was chewing a burger prepared by Eva and walked on the grassland outside the villa. The rest of the bodyguards were also in their positions. He divided the bodyguards into 2 groups, one for the first half of the night and the other for the second half of the night. He had a premonition that something would definitely happen tonight. This was his intuition honed in the battlefield after serving in the army for many years. Everyone, be alert. Although this is just a small task, you should be careful. You must remember, you only have one life. Looking back at the men who were busy setting up surveillance cameras, Holman said to them loudly, "Boss, don't worry. No one will joke about their own lives." At this time, a white strong man who was chewing a burger beside him laughed and took over. After glaring at the grinning guy, Holman said with a serious face, "Everyone check your weapons. I have a feeling that something will happen tonight." Hearing what Holman said, the busy people stopped what they were doing, quickly took out their pistols, opened the safety and checked them. For a while, the click sound continued. And the white man behind him, who was wearing a black suit like him, took out a German-made MP7 submachine gun from somewhere and fiddled with it. These team members have been with him for a long time and know that their boss's intuition is always accurate. So they didn't doubt Holman's words at all. When Holman and his team had just finished their work, a convoy drove in outside the ranch. 5 small commercial vehicles lined up and stopped at the gate of the ranch. Are you sure that there is no one else in there except the cowboy and the Chinese man? Harvey got out of the car and came to the 2 younger brothers who were following them, staring into their eyes and asked seriously. Boss, don't worry. We have been here for a whole day and haven't seen a single ghost, let alone a person. I guarantee that no one has come in or out. Seeing the younger brother who was watching him patting his chest and making assurances, Harvey's serious expression finally relaxed. He smiled at the 2 of them with satisfaction and said, "Thank you for your hard work. I will give you bonuses when I go back." After comforting the 2 grateful younger brothers, Harvey returned to his car, took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and smoked it slowly, quietly waiting for time to pass. He smoked one after another, and seeing that it was already 1 o'clock in the morning, Harvey threw away the last cigarette butt, patted the car window, and shouted to the younger brothers who were still dozing off, "Wake up, check your weapons quickly," and set off. The younger brothers who were suddenly awakened heard this and didn't care about dozing off. They immediately started the car and drove towards the villa. The younger brothers in the car also took out their pistols and began to check the ammunition. Harvey himself also pulled out his F-1911 from his waist and checked it. Kinzu was awakened by the gunshots from outside. He was half asleep when he suddenly heard Holman shout something, and then there was a burst of gunshots. Bang! The door was pushed open by Dale from the outside. She was wearing a tight leather jacket and holding a special M16, and rushed in directly. "Boss, it seems that your information is really accurate. Nearly 20 gangsters came, but they were all blocked by Holman." Dale looked at Kinzu in surprise. She didn't expect that her boss was so well informed in Boston. If she hadn't made preparations in advance, it would be a bit dangerous at night. "Are they all okay?" Kinzu didn't avoid Dale and Diva, who followed him in. He quickly put on his clothes and asked. "It's okay." Holman was prepared. He found them as soon as they arrived at the villa and knocked down 5 of them directly. Dale said excitedly, holding the gun in her hand and aiming. She seemed very happy. Helplessly looking at her sister, Eva said, "Boss, you stay in the house and wait until Holman has dealt with the outside before going out." Nodding, Kinzu said nothing, came to the French window and carefully hid in the corner to take a look outside. The lights outside the villa were bright, and from time to time, flames could be seen flashing, accompanied by painful groans. After taking a look, Kinzu was pulled back by Dale. Patting the majestic and plump, Dale said with some fear, "Boss, do you know that what you did just now is very dangerous? If you are not careful, you may be discovered. Do you know what it means if you are discovered?" He smiled awkwardly. Of course, he knew what it meant. One very likely result was a shot in the head. He turned his head away with a guilty conscience. He was just curious about the scene below. Ignoring Dale, who was staring at him, Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called David. "Clean, what's wrong?" "Oh. God. Clean, are you okay? What happened over there?" David, who had just been awakened from his sleep, asked in a daze. But before he could finish his words, he heard the crackling sound of gunfire over there. He was startled and asked loudly with some nervousness. "It's okay, it's just that I was right. There are more than 20 armed gangsters in the ranch now. Fortunately, I have 10 bodyguards to block them, but if there is no rescue, you may not see me anymore." Kinzu listened to David's somewhat nervous voice over there, and deliberately pretended to be a little nervous and said to him, "Hold on, Clean, don't worry, I promise that the police will appear in front of you within 20 minutes, wait. Thanks to Fengxi and 10 years old Worm for their reward support, thank you." Chapter 117 Harvey's Despair. David hung up the phone without waiting for Kinzu to react. He quickly put on his clothes and picked up his phone to dial. "Honey, go to sleep first. I have something urgent to do." Looking at his wife, who was woken up next to him, David lowered his head and kissed her deeply. Then, without waiting for her to reply, he spoke into the phone. Kinzu was speechless when he heard the busy tone. How could this guy be more excited than himself? Harvey felt cold all over this time. Hiding behind the rockery next to the swimming pool, he stared at the younger brother in front of him fiercely, his anger rising little by little. Hearing the bang, bang sound of bullets hitting the rockery from time to time, and the painful groans of his men next to him. Pa! Harvey raised his hand and slapped the guy in front of him. He yelled at the still confused younger brother in front of him, who was in charge of keeping watch. Fuck, didn't you say that no one has entered the ranch? Don't tell me that the people firing now are cowboys. This, boss, I really didn't see anyone go in. Pa! Another slap was thrown over, and Harvey didn't want to talk nonsense with him at this time. He yelled at the younger brothers who were a little panicked around him. Hurry up and get on with it. If we don't take this place today, we will all die. After saying that, he stuck his head out and fired several shots at the window of the villa. Holman was lying on a window on the first floor of the villa, and the other 9 bodyguards were also shooting at several windows. I don't know if the original designer of the villa predicted this situation in advance. Several windows of the villa just happened to see the situation outside clearly, and there was no blind spot in 360 degrees. He had noticed Harvey for a long time, and the other gangsters were approaching him vaguely. Seeing Harvey's head, he immediately fired a volley of bullets. Bang! Bang! Ah! Harvey groaned, covered his injured left arm, and quickly retracted his body. Boss, you're injured. Hearing the somewhat panicked voice of the younger brother next to him, Harvey endured the pain and said sternly, "Shut up, rushing quickly." Before he finished speaking, he faintly heard a buzzing sound made by the propeller stir in the air. Harvey looked up in astonishment, and his face suddenly looked ashen. In the distant sky, there were 2 helicopters with searchlights, slowly approaching here. Retreat quickly. Harvey screamed at the top of his lungs, quickly covered his left arm, and ran towards the car with his back bent. The younger brothers looked at each other, and some of them didn't react to what was going on. It was not until the helicopter quickly approached the sky above the villa and began to drop fully armed American soldiers from above like dumplings. The gangsters realized that things seemed to be getting out of hand. Go! 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 When Holman heard the iconic voice of the American soldiers coming from outside, he knew that things were almost over. Shrugging his shoulders, he muttered, "This is really a simple task." Kinzu also heard the voice outside and looked at the time. It had only been 15 minutes since he called David. He couldn't help but give a thumbs up to the speed of the American police. He smiled and said, "The police's response is quite fast. If ordinary people encounter such things, the police gentleman will react so quickly." Eva muttered beside her with some complaints. Bang bang bang. As they were talking, there was a knock on the door outside. Dale walked over and opened the door, and John walked in with Holman. "Mr. Clean, I think everything is fine. The federal police are cleaning outside. Should we go down and say hello?" Holman looked at Kinzu and kindly reminded him. "Although we are victims, we still have to go down and explain the situation." "Well, let's go down together. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Holman." Kinzu nodded, thanked Holman politely, and followed him downstairs. When passing by John, Kinzu patted the man with red eyes. He said, "John, you have worked hard tonight. Go to bed early." He just heard from Dale that John did not sleep all night and kept guarding up the stairs with Remington in his arms. "It's okay, boss, I'm not sleepy yet. I guess they should be here soon. I will go back to sleep with Susie later." John grinned. He still regretted that he didn't help much today. Hearing the crackling of fighting outside, he also felt itchy. It's a pity that there was no place for him to show his skills. When Kinzu arrived downstairs, he found that the door of the villa was still guarded by several bodyguards. They did not open it to let the federal police outside come in casually. He looked at Holman with appreciation. He was really a capable guy. When they arrived at the door, Holman opened the door at Kinzu's signal. He took the lead and went outside with several bodyguards to negotiate with the police. After a while, the police had not come yet, but the cowboys on the ranch rushed over with weapons in their hands. Because the living area was not very close to here, and the incident happened suddenly, it took less than 20 minutes from the beginning to the end, which was just enough time for them to rush over. "Boss, what's going on? Is there a thief in the ranch? Are you okay?" "Yes, boss, are you okay? John, you are here too? What's going on? John, didn't you say you were going into the mountains with the boss? What's going on?" Listening to the questions and concerns of everyone, Kinzu felt very comfortable. No matter the cowboys who had been there before or the fishermen and sailors who had been recruited recently, all of them came. None of them were the type who didn't care about anything. Quiet, everyone, be quiet. Qin Zhu clapped his hands and said, looking at the anxious Ryan and Will. When the voices gradually died down, Qin Zhu smiled and continued, I'm fine, everyone can rest assured. A few petty thieves broke into the ranch today. Fortunately, I just hired a few bodyguards to be with me, otherwise no one would pay you next month's salary. At the end of the speech, he laughed first. The tense atmosphere disappeared in an instant. It's okay, everyone go back first. John, you go back with Susie first, we have to postpone going into the mountains again. Qin Zhu blinked at John and said without blushing. He directly exposed the fact that John lied to Susie. Well, then, boss, we'll go back first if it's okay. Looking at Qin Zhu gratefully, John took Susie and said goodbye to Qin Zhu with everyone else. I didn't care about the police outside and went straight to the living area. Today is the second update. Thank you Fengzi for your continued support. By the way, I recommend a book to my friend, Marvel's Naruto Adventure, which brings the Naruto system to Marvel. Updates are guaranteed. 400,000 words are a bit fat, waiting to be slaughtered. Chapter 118 Nelson and Stella. As soon as the cowboys left, Holman came in with two middle-aged white men. Both of them were wearing police uniforms. One of them had 2 silver stars on his uniform, and the other had 2 silver bars. Boss, this is Mr. Nelson Poe, the Deputy Chief of the Boston Police Department, and Warner Stella, the Chief of the Revere Police Department. Mr. Nelson is in charge of leading the team today. Qin Zhu was a little surprised when he heard Holman's introduction. Although things were quite a big deal tonight, he didn't expect that a Deputy Chief of Boston would lead the team. This was equivalent to the second in command of the Boston Police Department. In his opinion, it was already very good to alarm the Chief of the Revere Police Department. He knew that the Revere Police Department was a large organization with more than 100 official police officers. You have to know that the American police are different from those in China. The Chief of Police in the United States is generally concurrently the governor or mayor. The Deputy Chief of the Boston Police Department in front of him is equivalent to a person who can cover the sky with one hand. Why would he personally run a trip in the middle of the night for this matter today? Mr. Clean, I'm so sorry. It was our negligence that frightened you. Hearing Nelson's polite words, Qin Zhu was even more confused when he saw the Deputy Chief in front of him, who was nearly 50 years old but still had a strong figure. Although he was a little confused about the situation, Qin Zhu would not lose the traditional etiquette of China. He politely stretched out his hand and shook hands with the other party and said, Director Nelson, you were polite. I believe you don't want this kind of thing to happen. It was all caused by those damn gangs. It seems that you still have to strengthen the security environment in Boston in the future. Deputy Chief, I'm only the Deputy Chief of the Boston Police Department. However, we will strengthen the study of what Mr. Keene said when we go back, and we will definitely not let this kind of thing happen again. Nelson first seriously emphasized his rank, and then smiled and said to Qin Zhu. Then he pointed to a middle-aged white man who was a little fat next to him and introduced him to Qin Zhu. Mr. Clean, this is Warner Stella, the new chief of the Revere Police Department. He just took office a few days ago. Listening to Nelson's meaningful words, Qin Zhu smiled awkwardly. It's just getting rid of one of your chiefs, and he still remembers it. He politely extended his hand and shook hands with Stella, pretending not to understand what Nelson said, and still said with a bright smile, Chief Stella, I'm really sorry for your trouble today. It's my duty, it's my duty. Protecting the safety of taxpayers is what we police officers should do. Qin Zhu was a little speechless. These foreigners spoke in official language, and they were no worse than those in China. But he still said with a smile, Director Stella is too polite. If you hadn't come here so quickly today, I would have been in real danger. Stella didn't say anything. He didn't know how to continue. He stared at Qin Zhu for a long time and had the urge to curse. Do you think I know who those people are around you? Not to mention these little hooligans, even if I bring people here, they will definitely not be able to rush in for a while. And do I dare not come faster? Think about your predecessor, wasn't he fired by you because he was late? But think about the deputy director standing next to him in Boston. Although he is not his direct superior now, it is better to restrain himself in front of his colleagues. Thinking of this, Stella still forced a smile and said, Mr. Keene is joking. Serving taxpayers is our obligation. Nelson next to him looked at his former subordinates and current colleagues, and felt a little embarrassed. He quickly interrupted and changed the subject, saying, "Mr. Clean, please come out and take a look to see if there are any people you know, so that we can go back and confirm their identities more quickly." Kinzu nodded and said nothing more. He took several Blackwater bodyguards and Dale and followed Nelson out of the villa. Outside, several Blackwater bodyguards, led by Holman, surrounded Kinzu and scattered around. They completely protected Kinzu and Diva in the middle, preventing any dangerous approach. Nelson pouted and sighed in his heart. Money is really a good thing. When will his men treat him like this? When Kinzu got outside, he found that there were quite a lot of police officers, and after seeing their badges clearly outside, he realized that the helicopter that landed at the beginning should belong to the Rapid Response Force of the Boston Police Department. Kinzu still had some understanding of this. The American police are divided into 3 levels: federal, state, and city and county, and they are not affiliated with each other. Only the federal police will be responsible to the federal government, and the state and city and county police departments are only responsible to their respective states and cities and counties. For example, those who came today are all state police from Massachusetts and city police from the Revere Police Department. As for the federal police, they usually won't be dispatched unless something big happens. At this time, the outside of the villa was in a mess, with bullet marks everywhere. Even the originally flat grass was now bumpy. The palm trees used for decoration were also full of bullet holes, and juice was constantly using out. "Deputy Director Nelson, what should I do with my losses?" Kinzu asked with some distress. He didn't think about it at first, but now looking at the mess outside, he felt so distressed. Nelson looked at Kinzu speechlessly. "Isn't it said that Chinese local tycoons are very generous? It shouldn't cost much to renovate these, right?" But he still said politely, "Please rest assured, Mr. Clean, this loss will definitely be compensated by them." "That's good, we must not let these guys get away with it, they are too daring. If I wasn't lucky enough to have bodyguards around, maybe they would have succeeded." Kinzu was still a little indignant. He didn't care whether it was because of the mission or not. He just had the urge to sweat when he thought of so many people with weapons trying to kill him. "Mr. Keene is right, let's go see if there is anyone you know." Nelson laughed dryly twice, and quickly took Kinzu to the side, but he was complaining in his heart, "Are you fooling around? Good luck. If you didn't know the news in advance, you would have so many bodyguards lying in ambush there." He discovered this situation when he just arrived at the scene. These gangsters never approached the villa within 20 meters. If Kinzu was not prepared, he would never believe it. Thanks to Fengxil Love and Binfeng's emotion for their rewards and support. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a Mundo Fanfic Novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 119 New Mission. Kinzu didn't know what Nelson was complaining about. He still felt wronged. Didn't he just want to improve his physical fitness? Why did so many people come? Not long after following Nelson, Kinzu came to a group of thugs who were being guarded by a group of fully armed police officers, squatting on the ground with their hands on their heads and trembling. Looking at these thugs in front of him, Kinzu felt sorry for them. It's easy to imagine that they are just a group of ordinary thugs. When have they ever seen such a big scene? Ordinary policemen may not be afraid of them, and they can even play tricks on them on the street. Because there is no evidence, the police can't do anything to them. But now it's different. When Harvey saw the helicopter, he didn't have the courage to resist. And when the first special police slid directly down from the helicopter, he didn't even have the courage to run away. Harvey thought the police would come at first, but he didn't expect them to come so quickly and in such a big scene. Even he had only seen this kind of scene in movies. Not to mention other thugs. Kinzu walked around the group of guys and didn't find a familiar face. But this is not surprising. He has only been in the United States for a short time and has been staying at the ranch most of the time since he came. How could he have seen these gangsters? But just because he doesn't know them doesn't mean no one knows them. Even next to him came forward and whispered in Kinzu's ear with some excitement. "Clean, I have seen that guy. I saw him when I went to the casino to find my father." As she said that, she pointed to a strong black man squatting on the ground next to him, holding his left shoulder with one hand and bowing his head in silence. Kinzu looked at Nelson next to him and said, "Deputy Chief Nelson, you heard it too. This is the person sent by the backstage of the Mad Dog gang that was arrested some time ago. There must be someone behind them. I hope you can find out clearly. Of course, Mr. Clean, please rest assured. We will definitely investigate it to the end." Nelson laughed and changed the subject. "Let's go to the side to take a statement. It's so late, and I won't disturb you, Mr. Clean, to rest." Kinzu knew it would be like this. Although there were many police officers coming today, and there was also a deputy chief police inspector. But Kinzu estimated that except for the few people who came to the ranch today, the people behind them would not have any problems. Kinzu curled his lips and said nothing. He was satisfied to complete the task. As for the troubles behind, he believed that David could solve them for him. By the time everything was done, it was already past 3 in the morning. Watching the police cars flashing neon lights, escorting these gangsters away, Kinzu stretched his body and said, "Okay. Everything is over. Let's go back to sleep. Holman, thank you for today. You should go and rest too. There is nothing to do." Kinzu smiled and patted Holman's shoulder when he passed by him. "It's okay. Mr. Clean, you should go and rest first. We will take turns to rest." Holman still had a poker face, but he was obviously tired when he spoke. After yawning, Kinzu ignored them and went up to the second floor of the villa with Dale, who was obviously unsatisfied, and Eva, who looked relaxed. After saying good night, Kinzu went into his bedroom. As soon as he returned to the room, Kinzu couldn't wait to open the system panel. Main quest. The Road to Becoming Stronger 1, completed, quest reward. Constitution +3, Strength +3, to be collected. Sure enough, the task above showed that it had been completed and the reward was to be collected. However, when Kinzu clicked the collect button impatiently, he received a prompt from the system. "Ding, host, please note that the body transformation will be carried out during sleep. After receiving the reward, the host will fall into a deep sleep. Please confirm whether the surrounding environment is safe before receiving the reward." Kinzu was stunned. He didn't expect that it would be so troublesome to receive a reward, but there was no way. Who let the system be the boss? So Kinzu entered the bathroom to wash his feet, then turned off the lights and lay on the bed, and then couldn't wait to click to receive the reward. Just after confirming the receipt, Kinzu felt that his upper and lower eyelids quickly became heavy. After holding on for 5 seconds, he fell into a deep sleep. The next day, when the sun rose again, Kinzu woke up from his sleep. Opening his bright eyes, Kinzu felt that he no longer had the feeling of weakness when he just woke up. He jumped up from the bed with energy, and Kinzu excitedly waved his fists a few times. Although he only increased his strength by a few points, he felt that he could kill a cow with one punch. Of course, that was just an illusion caused by the sudden increase in strength. Without bothering to wash up, Kinzu opened his attribute panel first. Host. Kinzu Constitution. 10 + 3 Strength. 11 + 3 Agility. 11 Intelligence. 13 Specialties. None Skills. Cooking LV1, English LV1, Free Fighting LV1, Appraisal LV2, Treasure Hunting LV2, Fishing LV1. Growth Attributes. 5 stars. Well, Kinzu nodded with satisfaction. This is more like what he said. Normal people have 10 points of strength. With the system as a powerful weapon, how can he be so much weaker than others? But thinking about Dale's terrifying power, Kinzu was a little discouraged. When can he regain some dignity as a man from her? After closing the attribute panel, Kinzu was about to turn off the system when he accidentally glanced at the big question mark on the task panel. Kinzu clicked on the task panel with some doubts and was surprised to find that there was still an unclaimed task. What the hell is this? With a nervous mood, Kinzu clicked on the task introduction. Main task. The Road to Becoming Stronger. Continue to be received. Task introduction. Although the host successfully avoided an attack by the forces behind Mad Dog, the other party will definitely not give up so easily, so they must disappear. Task requirements. Dig out the mysterious forces behind Mad Dog. Task rewards. Intelligence +5, Agility +3, Strength +5, Constitution +3, Ranch points +30,000. Looking at the long list of task rewards, Kinzu's saliva was gushing. This system is too tempting. It knows that I have no points, and it uses points to tempt me. It seems that I can't refuse to accept it. Kinzu gritted his teeth and took the task with Tez. This is not difficult, but touching. Just look at the first reward and you will know that this task obviously does not need to be completed by brute force, and Kinzu also has some understanding of David's way of doing things. Combined with some current situations in the United States, he believes that he doesn't even need to show up, and this task can be easily completed. Thanks to riding a donkey to the market for the comment, and also thanks to everyone for the reward and recommendation. Liu thanks you. Chapter 120 David arrives. Kinzu looked at the time. It was already past 7 in the morning. After paying homage to the mysterious god who created the system, he went to the bathroom to wash up happily while humming a tune. Such a simple task of giving points, and so many points at a time, this system is simply too easy to use. He himself could feel that good things seemed to come one after another recently. Could it be that he had accumulated virtue in his previous life? After washing up, Kinzu came out wrapped in the bath towel. He opened the closet and looked. It seemed that he bought too many Gucci clothes, and he hadn't worn them all in one day. He estimated that David would be here soon, so he had to be a little more formal. After all, there were guests, and Holman and the others were still downstairs. He couldn't be as casual as he usually was at the ranch. Sure enough, when Kinzu was still sitting in the restaurant, enjoying the delicious breakfast made by Eva, the sound of a car braking came from outside the villa. When Eva heard the car honking and was about to stand up to open the door, Holman, who was eating breakfast, motioned his men to run over. Eva had no choice but to smile at Holman, then picked up the plate and went to the kitchen to get food. When the doors opened, David hurried in. Holman looked at Kinzu, and waited for Kinzu to nod before motioning his men to come back. Clean, it's great that you're okay. As soon as he entered the villa and saw that Kinzu was okay, David couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, when he saw Kinzu eating breakfast leisurely, David suddenly felt a little unbalanced. He nodded to Holman and others, came to sit next to Kinzu and complained. Clean, I didn't sleep all night because of you, but you were still eating breakfast so leisurely. As he said that, he picked up a sandwich that Eva had just brought up and took a big bite. He hasn't eaten since he woke up in the middle of the night yesterday. Thank you so much. How are things going now? Kinzu smiled and poured David a glass of milk, and asked with some concern. You're welcome, we're friends after all, don't worry, things are almost done, just wait and see. David raised his eyebrows and said proudly. Kinzu directly ignored his expression of how am I awesome. He continued to ask, really? When will there be a result? David, who was ignored by Kinzu, muttered a few words of indignation. Finally, he was stared at by Kinzu and had no choice but to say helplessly, don't worry, Clean, there should be news soon, otherwise I have worked in vain all night. Kinzu was really touched this time. He didn't expect David to care so much about his affairs. Looking at his somewhat tired expression, he said with concern, so you haven't slept all night? Do you want to go to the guest room for a napkin and sleep first? Stuffing the last bite of the sandwich into his mouth, David said vaguely while drinking milk, it's okay, it's not too late to sleep after the news comes out. Picking up the napkin to wipe the crumbs from the corners of his mouth, David asked with some concern, I heard that a lot of people came yesterday. No one was injured at the ranch? No, I didn't notify them. I just hired Holman and others. Thanks to them, you don't know, there were more than 20 guys with guns yesterday. Oh, God, are they crazy? Who knows? But with Holman here, none of them stepped into the 20-meter range of the villa. Plus, the police came so quickly yesterday, so none of them escaped. Kinzu said this, and asked curiously, David, why did the police come so quickly yesterday? Hearing Kinzu's question, David laughed a few times with some complacency and said, hey, it's nothing. I just called Cook and asked him to call the police. Kinzu was speechless. Thinking that President Pingaloo called the police personally, it was good that the police chief didn't get scared. However, since Cook knew about this, why didn't he call him? After Kinzu expressed his doubts, David slapped his head and said unhappily, you said that, after you called last night, your phone couldn't be reached. I called several times in the morning and couldn't get through. No way. Hey, where's my phone? Kinzu touched his pocket and found that his phone was not with him, so he quickly looked around. When Holman helped Kinzu find his phone from the corner of the sofa, he found that it was out of power and turned off. Kinzu was a little embarrassed and said awkwardly, maybe I was too nervous yesterday and didn't notice that my phone was missing. He quickly ran upstairs to get the charger and plugged in the phone. Kinzu shook his head with a bit of amusement. Thinking about the past, he always had his phone in his hand. He didn't expect that he used his phone less after he hid money. He didn't even notice that his phone was lost until now. Clean, it seems that life on the ranch is still leisurely. Even the phone is used less. Looking at David's somewhat weird expression, Kinzu glared at him fiercely, but he didn't dare to explain anything because he was really nervous yesterday. Boss, look, your news has appeared on the news. In the end, Eva couldn't stand it anymore and spoke up to help Kinzu out. Kinzu put down his rich gold and took the tablet that Eva handed over. He didn't watch the news yet, but sighed that he still needed a tablet. He would ask Cook to get one another day. The tablet displayed the homepage of Facebook, the most popular social software in the United States. There was another bold English title on it. Billionaire's private residence was invaded by force. Who is the mastermind behind it? Kinzu clicked it and found the specific content of the news. He quickly browsed it and was surprised to find that it was similar to what happened yesterday, but Holman and others were said to be Kinzu's bodyguards. Looking at David next to him, he asked in confusion, "Is this your masterpiece?" David shrugged proudly, shook his hair and said, "I came in a hurry today and didn't buy a newspaper. I guess it should have been published in the newspaper now." Kinzu turned his head to look at Dale, who was standing next to him. Dale was not wearing the tight leather jacket today, but she changed into tight jeans, which showed her long legs to the fullest. The loose back shirt on her upper body couldn't hide her proud curves, magnificent breasts, and perky buttocks. Everything was so tempting. At this time, Dale was standing behind Kinzu with her arms folded across her chest, so when Kinzu turned around, he saw the surging waves. "It's a new week. Please support me with your recommendations and rewards. Liu-un would like to thank everyone here." Chapter 121 Cook's Phone Call. Ahem. Kinzu coughed lightly to cover up his restless heart. He twisted his sitting posture unnaturally and then said, "Dale, drive to Revere and buy all the newspapers for today." Dale nodded and agreed straightforwardly. She took two long and straight legs, picked up the car keys and went out. Kinzu reluctantly took his eyes off the long legs, but he didn't expect that when he looked up, he ran into Eva's playful eyes. His old face flushed immediately, and he felt as if he was eating secretly and was caught on the spot. Touching his old face, which was a little hot, Kinzu smiled awkwardly and avoided Eva's meaningful eyes. He picked up the gold mobile phone that was charging on the table. He pressed the power button directly. After quickly passing the power on screen, Kinzu's luxurious gold mobile phone began to vibrate non-stop. More than a minute passed, and when the phone was completely silent, Kinzu opened the screen. After unlocking it, he looked through it carefully. There were more than a dozen missed calls, including those from people he knew and didn't know, people he was familiar with and people he wasn't familiar with. And all these missed calls were from the United States. Kinzu was a little dazed. Did he know so many people in the United States? After a careful search, he found the number of President Cook, and Kinzu called directly. "Hi, Clean, is that you?" "Yes, Mr. Cook, thank you so much yesterday." Hearing Cook's somewhat surprised voice from the other side, Kinzu smiled and thanked him. "Ha, it's a small matter. I'm relieved to hear that you are okay. What happened yesterday?" Lawyer David didn't quite understand when he called me. He might be in a hurry, so he didn't explain it clearly. "This is what happened." Kinzu smiled and explained for David, and then told Cook the whole thing from beginning to end. Cook was sitting in the office in a somewhat listless state at this time. He also did not sleep well the night before. After listening to Kinzu's story, he seemed extremely indignant. "Clean, don't worry, these daring guys will pay the price for their actions. And I have protested to Governor Theodore, and he promised to find the murderer as soon as possible. You should also pay attention to public opinion recently. Put pressure on government departments as much as possible to let them know that we are not easy to bully." In fact, when he received David's call yesterday, his first reaction was that it was absolutely impossible. How could there be such a daring person? Even if you succeed in killing someone, can you run away? This is a capitalist society, and there are a lot of people who will find you out for money. But then I thought about it, as Kinzu's representative lawyer, David would not come to make fun of him in the middle of the night for no reason. So I got up and called my old friend, Jerry Theodore, the governor of Massachusetts. As the Republican governor of Massachusetts, Theodore still attaches great importance to the call from Cook, the president of the largest company in terms of market value and his good friend. After hearing that a shareholder of Pinga was invaded by force in his own territory, he was also shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. You know, the current president is the spokesperson for the rich, and the support of the rich is also that key to the Republican victory this time. The current situation is not very calm. If something like this happens again. Theodore shook his head and didn't dare to think about it anymore. He quickly got up from the bed, found his mobile phone, and called his deputy Nelson. He asked him to leave immediately and ensure Qinzhu's personal safety. After listening to Cook's words, Qinzhu knew why Nelson came in person yesterday. It turned out that his boss had said hello. After thanking Cook again, Qinzhu hung up the phone. Looking at the dozen missed calls left on his phone, Qinzhu had a headache. There is no other way. Since the other person called you, it means that he knows you. If you don't call back, you are being ungrateful. So Qinzhu continued to call and called back one by one. Unexpectedly, even Douglas called him. Douglas was relieved to hear that Qinzhu was fine. He came to the company early in the morning and turned on the computer, and saw that something had happened to Qinzhu. He called Qinzhu several times, but was always told that he was out of service area. This made him anxious. He had just made an emotional investment in him, so wouldn't something happen now? After knowing that Qinzhu was fine, Douglas said a few words in a hurry and hung up the phone. Listening to the noisy sound over there, it seemed like they were in a meeting. After Qinzhu made a round of calls, his phone became a little hot. After putting the gold on the table to continue charging, Qinzhu rubbed his sore neck and said depressedly, "It seems that making phone calls is not a good job. I really don't know how those young couples can spend so much time on the phone." After saying this, he found that there was no echoing voice around him as he had imagined. Looking up, everyone looked at him with confusion. Patting his forehead, Qinzhu remembered that this was in the United States. How could these foreigners understand those profound Chinese combinations in China? After a lot of effort, Qinzhu finally made these foreigners understand what it meant to have a long phone call. Clean, do Chinese men and women have so much to say every day? After listening to Qinzhu's explanation, Eva didn't care about despising him and asked in surprise. She really had never tried to make a phone call for several hours. Well, how can I put it? I can only say that some people like it this way. Couples who live apart from each other often do this. Oh, that's okay. I thought you had so much to talk about every day. Every time I call, I just say a few words and hang up. Eva said fearfully, patting her proud bust that was not much smaller than her sister's. That silly look was so adorable that Qinzhu, who was originally a little tired, immediately revived. Hey, Clean, have you finished your call? You're still calling after such a long time. David couldn't stand it anymore and urged impatiently. He quickly pushed his phone inside, and Qinzhu indicated that he had answered all the calls. So everyone sat together again, gathered around Eva's tablet, and began to browse the news. After closing Facebook, Qinzhu opened several other social networking sites and found that the headlines were all about reports about what happened last night. Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. Chapter 122 The Significance of Shares. Qinzhu couldn't help but marvel at David's ability to do things. In just a few hours, he actually managed to get so many things done. Hey, Clean, don't look at me. This is not all my credit. I can't handle so many media by myself. Seeing Qinzhu's eyes, David knew that he had misunderstood, and quickly waved his hand to explain. Well, okay, then who can have such a great power? Qinzhu nodded suddenly. I said it. If David had such a great power, he would not be just a lawyer now. Who else could it be? Of course, it was President Cook who helped to make the connection. In addition, this matter was originally very explosive, so those guys overturned the previous plan and reprinted today's newspaper. After speaking, David took the tablet from Qinzhu and continued to flip through it. It seems that Pingo shares are still useful in my hands. Fortunately, I didn't sell them at the beginning. Qinzhu just sighed, and when he turned his head, he saw David looking at him in surprise. He looked at himself back and forth in confusion. David, what's wrong? Is there something wrong? You actually thought about selling shares? Do you know how many people want to buy but can't? You know that Pingo is rising every day. Even if you sleep at home, your money is increasing rapidly. You actually want to sell it? Hearing David's somewhat excited tone, Qinzhu touched his nose and said embarrassedly, Didn't I not plan to develop in the United States in the first place? How could I sell it now? David breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. The reason why he was so excited was mainly because Old Man Hill had done him a favor in the past. He didn't want to see his heir give the old man's property to others for nothing. Clean, you have to know that you can't enter the upper class of the United States just because you have money. The reason why so many people help this time is that Old Man Hill had a good relationship with people, and the other is the Pingo shares in your hand. After saying such a long paragraph, David was a little thirsty. He took a sip of the coffee that Eva had just brought to the table. Looking at Kinzu's puzzled expression, he continued, "Don't you think about it, now apart from the shares circulating on the stock market, who would be stupid enough to sell shares? You are now a person with a vote on the board of directors. Well, isn't it just one vote? Is it so influential?" Kinzu asked weakly. "Of course, don't you look at what kind of company this is? It has the world's largest market value. You are one of the directors. Who can ignore this influence?" Looking at Kinzu, who seemed to understand, David was no longer able to complain. So this guy doesn't take Pingo seriously at all. Just as the two were talking, there was a sound of the door opening outside, and Dale walked in with a pile of newspapers in his arms and long legs. When Dale bent down to put the newspaper on the coffee table, Kinzu subconsciously wanted to take a few glances at the plumpness. However, when he caught a glimpse of Eva's teasing eyes from the corner of his eye, Kinzu quickly pretended to be serious without looking away. Eva next to him was a little confused. When did the boss become so serious? Ignoring Eva's little thoughts, Kinzu picked up the newspaper from the table and started to read it. The first one was the most influential Los Angeles Times in the United States. The front page headline read, "Gunman broke into the billionaire's residence late at night, what is his intention?" He quickly browsed the content and found that it was similar to the content on the internet. The main content was still urging the police to find the murderer behind the scenes. After reading the front page headline, Kinzu threw the newspaper aside and continued to read the next newspaper. He was generally not interested in news other than his own. The New York Times, HSD Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Daily News. Almost all the influential newspapers in the United States reported the incident, and they were all on the most prominent front page. Kinzu suddenly thought of a question, and looked at David with a bitter smile and said, "Ha ha, David, am I famous now?" "Of course, Clean, you should be the most popular billionaire this year, more popular than those stars." Seeing Kinzu's somewhat sad face, David laughed and teased. He flicked the newspaper that Eva had put away and turned it over again. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there are no photos. "Ah, Clean, isn't it good to be famous?" David asked with some curiosity. "I don't know how many people want to be famous all day long. Why do you look like you were going to the execution ground?" "Of course I want a good reputation, but look at these newspapers, every one of them can't avoid that sentence." "Which sentence?" David also flicked through the newspaper and asked in confusion. "Look." Kinzu pointed to a place for David. "This poor billionaire almost went to see God." Ha ha. After reading this sentence with great joy, David smiled and comforted. "It's okay, poor billionaire, aren't you fine now? You should go to sleep quickly, I'm going out for a walk." After saying that, Kinzu no longer paid attention to this unscrupulous guy and got up and walked out. However, looking at Holman and others who got up with him, Kinzu hesitated a little. It should be fine now, right? Think about it, no matter how crazy the group of mad dogs are, they should not dare to touch this bad luck now. Holman, you guys go back first. I don't have anything to do here. Thank you so much for yesterday. After saying that, Kinzu took out the checkbook from his pocket, wrote a check and handed it over. "Okay, Mr. Clean, contact me next time if you need it." Holman also took the check without hesitation, nodded at Kinzu, and waved his men away. Kinzu took Dale to the door and watched them get in the car and leave. Then he turned around and said, "You go in. I'm going to the stable. You don't have to follow me." "Clean, how about I follow you? The danger is not over yet. What if they are desperate?" After hearing what Dale said, Kinzu became a little uncertain. Looking at the unfinished task on the task panel, he had to nod. He walked towards the stable with Dale. Before he arrived, he saw John and Ryan riding horses towards this side. "Boss, how is it?" When they got closer, John pulled Sandra's reins and asked with concern after jumping off the horse. "Yes, boss, it was really dangerous yesterday. Why don't you call everyone over to prevent them from coming again?" Ryan also said with concern. Kinzu patted the two on the shoulders and said with a smile, "Don't worry, everything is almost done. No need to trouble you. Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. As a 9-to-9 office worker, Liu is really sorry for updating." I will definitely update a few more chapters on Sunday to thank you. Now Leon can only guarantee continuous updates. I start writing after get off work at 9 o'clock every day. I'm a clumsy writer and can only write one chapter in 2 hours. Chapter 123 The Problem of the Cattle. John and Ryan wanted to take a look, and John said, since everything is fine, let's go back first. The cattle had just arrived at the grazing area. Okay, then wait for me, I'll go over there to take a look. Since they met, Kinzu decided to go to the grazing area together, so the two of them got off the horse, led the horse and followed behind, and the four of them walked towards the stable while chatting. Kinzu led Xiaobao out of the stable and gently stroked its excited big horse face. Xiaobao kept snorting and rubbed his head gently in Kinzu's palm. Even though it was not the first time he saw this man and horse so close, John still said with some envy, "Boss, your horse is really good, so spiritual." "Ha, of course, don't you look at who raised it, right, Xiaobao?" As he said that, he pulled Xiaobao's big ears with his hand until it shook its head in dissatisfaction and then let go. Looking at this scene speechlessly, John was no longer able to complain. I really don't understand why a horse with such a wild temperament becomes so obedient when it comes to Kinzu. After playing with Xiaobao for a while, when Dale also led a satin black quarter out, he held the saddle and turned over to ride on it. "Let's go. It's been a long time since I saw those little troublemakers. I wonder if they still remember me." After saying that, he gently pinched the horse's belly. Xiaobao took small steps and trotted forward. John and his friends also rode up. "Ha, boss, I guess they won't forget you. Now it's much easier for us to graze." Kinzu smiled and shook his head when he heard it. "Then it seems that we have to let them remember today." Soon, Kinzu came to today's grazing area under the leadership of John. Riding on the horse, feeling the gentle breeze caressing my cheeks, what caught my eye was the endless green grass that undulated like waves in the breeze. The sun had just begun to shine brightly. Under the golden light, the black herds of cattle were scattered in the endless pasture, just like clouds floating in the sky. The black Angus cattle were lowering their heads, chewing the green grass leisurely. The naughty calves were playing around their mothers. The little guys looked up inadvertently and saw several tall four-legged animals coming from a distance. They were so scared that they quickly shrank and hid behind their mothers. Seeing Kinzu coming, the Lot brothers, who were watching the herd of cattle from a distance, trotted over. When he got closer, Locke pulled the reins and asked worriedly, "Boss, have you dealt with yesterday's matter? Is everything okay?" "Don't worry, it's all right. Thank you for your concern." Looking at the two brothers, Kinzu thanked them first, and then said, "By the way, how were the cattle now? What about the mutant Angus cattle?" "The cattle are all fine. None of them are sick so far. As for the cattle, you'll know if you take a closer look." Locke shrugged helplessly and gestured to the distance. Looking at this guy speechlessly, if you talk to the boss with this attitude in China, it would be strange if you were not thrown into the small dark room. "Forget it, since you care about me so much, I won't bother with you about this attitude." After complaining a few words in his heart, Kinzu carefully looked at the cattle in the distance. The cattle in the distance are still black, and there is no difference. Kinzu muttered a few words in his heart, pulled the reins of Xiaobao, and motioned it to step forward a few steps. Xiaobao walked a few steps slowly and approached some more cattle. Only then did Kinzu realize that the head bull in a group of cattle seemed to be much bigger. "Yes, boss, the mutant cattle have replaced the previous head bull, and basically occupied the female cows. Now they fight occasionally, and they have never lost." Mike saw that Kinzu had discovered the problem, and walked forward with some distress. "Yes, those ordinary bulls can't compete with these guys. Fortunately, there are only about 20 of them now. If there are more, I guess there will be no other bulls." John also wrote up and echoed that they discovered this problem a few days ago, but unfortunately there was no solution. They could only gather all the troublesome bulls together. Fortunately, the herd is large enough now and can still be separated. Dale, who was standing next to him, curled her lips in disdain and said, "What's the big deal? If you have the ability, just go ahead. Doesn't this show that our current breed of cattle is good?" She admired the mutant Angus cattle's behavior. "If you have the ability, you can defeat me." Her mindset has always been that the strong are respected. Hearing what Dale said, Kinzu nodded in agreement. "Yes, wouldn't their offspring all be mutants? We are still thinking about expansion, isn't this just right? But, if this happens, our current batch of young bulls will be useless. It's still okay now. When the estrus season comes, won't there be conflicts every day, Looking at the two ranch bastards' self-righteous looks, Locke rubbed his hair a little frantically. Is that so? Kinzu was a little confused. What should he do now? Turning his head to look at the side, Dale looked even more heroic on the horse. Seeing Kinzu looking at him, he turned his head to the side indifferently. He used his eyes fiercely and took a few tofu on that sexy body. Kinzu could only look at John next to him. You should have a solution to the problem you raised, right? No way, either sell the bulls as soon as possible, or separate them to graze. Looking at Kinzu, John thought for a long time, and shrugged his shoulders. There were only so many ways. In fact, there was another way he didn't say, because Kinzu would not agree, and he didn't want to do that. After thinking for a long time, Kinzu finally said, in this case, let's graze separately, separate the mutant cattle and some cows, and go to the pasture on the other side. This is the only way, but the cost of grazing will increase, and we have to assign 2 cowboys to look after them. Then divide it, and if it's not enough, hire more people. Kinzu said firmly, he really didn't care about this aspect. Boss, Eva and I can help. Although I'm not good at grazing, I think it should be okay if we just look at the cattle. Dale next to him heard that there were not enough people, turned around and looked at Kinzu, and said very seriously. Now, besides Kinzu, the sister's of the most idle in the ranch. She is better off because she is Kinzu's bodyguard and can go out with Kinzu. But Eva is idle every day, which is not good for a long time. Thanks to Fengxi for the reward and support. Chapter 124 The Black Hand Behind the Scenes. Well, that's fine. If you're too busy, Eva can go over and help. Kinzu nodded, agreeing with Dale's opinion. He could also feel that Eva still liked ranch life. Actually, I can still handle it now. If I can't handle it later, we'll talk about it. John thought about it. In fact, there are quite a few cowboys now. It's better not to bother them if there's nothing to do. When will it start? John looked at the sturdy Angus cows in the distance and said with some love and hate, let Ryan take the mutant guys to other pastures in the afternoon. Fortunately, there are not many of them now, otherwise it would be a real trouble. Since it was going to be afternoon, Kinzu didn't plan to wait here. He had already seen it here, so he greeted Dale, said goodbye to John, and rode to the beach. After turning around a few woods, Kinzu and Dale rode their horses to the dock. The small dock at this time was a little tidier than when Kinzu first came. Since the coastline of the ranch is mainly sandy beaches, the water depth in this dock area is not too deep. So the dock extends a long distance into the sea. Come down and walk in. Seeing that they have arrived at the dock, Kinzu turned his head and said something to Dale, then turned over and got off the horse. He patted Shilaba's big butt and let her go to the side. Not long after walking inside, I saw Will and Simon and others inspecting the dock and repairing some minor damages. Boss, you're here. Is everything okay? Will looked up and saw Kinzu and Dale, so he stood up and greeted them. Well, nothing happened. Come and take a look. How about this dock? Can we use it for the time being? Looking at Will's hands full of oil, Kinzu asked with a frown. If the dock can't be used, it will be a bit troublesome. After wiping the oil stains on his hands, Will stomped on the dock under his feet and said with a smile, Boss, don't worry. If we repair it, I dare not say how much it will cost. It will definitely be fine if we hold on for another year or two. That's good. When we are free for a while, we will prepare to build a new dock. After all, we can't have only one ship in the future. Kinzu was relieved. As for whether the dock was stopped because of the arrival of the ship, that would be embarrassing. In fact, he didn't need to buy a boat so quickly. Anyway, he had been short of points for more than a day or two. Only he understood the meaning of settling on the boat so quickly. He walked around the dock again and saw Simon and the others busy. He couldn't help much and felt it was meaningless, so he went back to the villa. At noon, Kinzu had just finished lunch and was sitting on the sofa teasing Daha and Shiaha. And Dale was sitting cross-legged on the other side, watching TV boredly. At this time, the mobile phone on the side rang. Kinzu reached out and patted the head of little Jerry lying on the side. Little Jerry jumped up knowingly. He ran to the table and took the phone. In the helpless rolling eyes of Dale on the side, Kinzu patted little Jerry's head and praised with a smile. Well, you were getting more and more sensible. You have made progress. Boss, there is news about the cows we contacted a few days ago. Do you want to go over and take a look? Hearing John's hesitant question on the other end of the phone, Kinzu also frowned slightly. It shouldn't be such a coincidence, right? And has the dairy factory been built? By the way, John, has the dairy factory once been built? It was built a few days ago, and they left the ranch a long time ago. Ah, really? Okay, by the way, how many cows did you see this time? Is it far away? Kinzu turned the topic awkwardly. Things have been a bit messy recently. It seems that he remembers that Ons called him. There are more than 100 cows this time, and they are also owned by a rancher in Revere. It's not too far from here. Do you want to go and take a look? Well, let's go and take a look. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu was a little confused. Could this be a trap? Don't worry, Clean, I guarantee they don't have time to deal with you now. Hearing the voice, Kinzu looked back and saw that David had woken up and was sitting next to him yawning. Why do you say that? Now it's just that public opinion is not good for them. The police haven't found the person behind the scenes yet. Rubbing his still sore eyes, David said helplessly, Why do you think I got up so early? I just received news that Harvey has confessed everything. Harvey? Is he one of those gangsters? Well, he was the leader last night. The police found his family and he collapsed and confessed everything. David sighed and said, I didn't expect this to be a filial man. It's rare. He looked at this guy with a frown on his face. I don't know if he hasn't woken up yet. He hasn't talked about the topic for so long. Who is behind this? Seeing Kinzu getting impatient, David stopped keeping him in suspense and said with a smile, It's a gang entrenched in the west end of Boston. The leader is Kevin DuPont, a descendant of a U.S. military veteran. He has been doing well in Boston thanks to the relationship with his father's comrades. Touching his chin, Kinzu said thoughtfully, So, this guy still has a backer? I guess so. That guy seems to be in the police system. David thought about it and said uncertainly. He remembered that his friend seemed to say so. Will that have any impact on this matter? Kinzu felt a little guilty. If the Boston Police Department withstood the pressure, he would be in trouble. Clean, you can rest assured. Governor Theodore is personally paying attention to this matter. I heard that he seems to be holding a meeting in the Boston Police Department now. Kinzu was relieved when he heard this, and couldn't help but sigh that no matter where you are, it's easier to get things done if you have connections. After a while, John and Ryan pushed the door and walked in. Boss, when are we leaving? After greeting Kinzu, John nodded to David who was sitting on the side. Kinzu motioned for the two to sit down, and looked at Ryan with some confusion. John didn't say on the phone that he would take Ryan with him, did he? Boss, because the ranch over there is not too big this time, the ranch owner doesn't cover it. If we find it good, we have to bring it back by ourselves. Nodding suddenly, Kinzu looked at David and said, Then we will leave first. What about you? Do you want to go to sleep for a while? No, is there anything else to eat? I'm almost starving. I haven't even had lunch yet. David patted his hungry stomach and complained. Thank you Fenxi for your reward and support, and thank you Berishu for rewarding a helmsman. I'm still at work, and I saw that there is another helmsman. I will send out this only chapter first, and there will be another chapter after get off work in the evening. Thank you for your support. I also sincerely thank every friend who supports Liuun. Chapter 125 Preparation for Action. Kinzu rolled his eyes helplessly. It was just past dinner time. Was it that serious? However, he still pointed to the kitchen and said, Eva left some food for you. Just put it in the microwave. We'll go there first. When they walked out of the villa, Dale had already driven the Knight the 15th out and was waiting at the door. John and Ryan drove the Ford, 750 inches front and led the way. There was also a trailer for livestock behind them. The two cars drove out of the ranch one after the other and drove towards Revere. The interstate highway was as empty as ever, with so few cars that it was a little scary. It felt as if you were the only one in the world. After driving along the interstate highway with the same scenery for about 10 minutes, the trailer in front got off the highway and turned into a dirt road next to it. After walking along the dirt road for another 2 minutes, Kinzu saw a big ranch sign not far away, Mars Ranch. The car did not stop at the ranch gate, but drove directly into the ranch and stopped in front of a 2-story building. Boss, wait a minute, I'll go check first. Kinzu was about to get out of the car, but Dale stopped him with her hand. Then Kinzu looked at Dale in surprise, took out a pistol from the storage box, loaded it, and pushed the door behind him and walked out. When did this girl bring the gun out? Kinzu was a little puzzled, but it was better this way, and his own safety was more guaranteed. After waiting in the car for a while, he saw Dale's slender figure turning from the front. Boss, John and the others are waiting for you. As he said, he helped Kinzu open the car door from the outside. After getting out of the car and walking a few steps, he came to the front of the two-story building and saw John smiling and talking to a white old man who was about 50 years old and slightly bald. Seeing Kinzu come in, John introduced him with a smile. Boss, this is Mars Sit, the owner of Mars Ranch. This must be Clean, I've been hearing about you recently, you're a celebrity. Mars smiled and stretched out his hand to shake hands with Kinzu, saying a little exaggeratedly, "Ha, you're not a celebrity at all, Mr. Mars, you're joking." After a few humble words with a smile, Kinzu started chatting with the ranch owner. Clean, let's go take a look at the cows first. After chatting for a while, Mars couldn't help but speak first. Well, let's go take a look first. Kinzu didn't want to be polite anymore, so he simply agreed. Mars found 2 4-wheel motorcycles and took Kinzu and the other 3 to the ranch. On the way, John saw Kinzu looking around and introduced. Boss, this ranch is not very large, about 1,000 acres, mainly raising cows and horses. Now the ranch seems to have nearly 2,000 cows, which is the largest source of milk in Revere. Nodding, Kinzu continued to look around. This place is different from his ranch. His ranch is mainly alfalfa. And now what Kinzu saw was endless corn, alfalfa, soybeans and fields, as well as green grass. The fields were dotted with raw milk collection and processing units. John, what is that sign? Kinzu asked in confusion, looking at a sign in the field. John looked in the direction of Kinzu's finger and smiled. That is the organic certification mark issued by the United States Department of Agriculture. Are these all organic? Kinzu asked in disbelief, pointing to the corn in the field. If all of these were organic, the cost would be huge. Of course, Clean, the feed ingredients here are all organically grown, safe and secure. Mars brought the 2 of them to the door of a feeding barn, heard Kinzu's question, and took it over with a smile. Kinzu got out of the car with John, and was a little thoughtful. He had forgotten all these certifications. The vegetables in his vegetable garden should also be rated as organic vegetables, right? Following Mars into a feeding barn, Kinzu found that there was a passage in the middle of the barn that could allow large trucks to pass through. The fences on both sides were full of Dutch black and white dairy cows. Walking into the middle of the barn, although the temperature outside was not low, Kinzu did not feel hot, nor did he smell the stench as he had imagined. The large fans installed on both sides are sufficient to ensure ventilation and warmth in the barn, and at the same time, they will spray water to cool down the cows at intervals to ensure the comfort of the cows. Clean, take your time to pick. There are more than 300 calves here, most of them are cows. Mars pointed to one side of the warehouse and said to Kinzu. He turned his head and looked at John, who understood and took Ryan to pick together. If Kinzu was asked to pick, he might have picked all the bad ones. After working for more than an hour, when Kinzu and Dale were getting a little impatient, John came over and said, "Boss, I've chosen. Mr. Mars's cows are all good, and he picked the best 100. Well, okay, let's take these for now. Mr. Mars, what do you think?" "Of course, no problem, Clean, just pick the ones you want." Mars laughed and said he was not afraid that Kinzu would cheat with such a small amount of money. After more than an hour, with the help of Mars, John and Ryan finally drove all the cows to the animal pen. Back to the small building, Kinzu took out his checkbook, wrote a check and handed it to Mars. The cows this time were not cheap, nearly $2,000 each. "Clean, you keep them first, and wait for the next batch of calves to come out. If you still need them, call me." Mars waved goodbye to Kinzu, and his heart was so happy. It was different when he met a rich man. Before 5 o'clock in the evening, Kinzu and his party finally rushed back to the ranch at lightning speed, and under the leadership of John, they came directly to the newly built dairy factory. "Is this the dairy factory?" Kinzu pointed to the building in front of him that was very similar to the barn of Mars's house, and said in disbelief. "Yes, this is just to take the raw milk. The subsequent processing is in the factory over there." John pointed to a newly built building next to him and said to him with a smile, "That's good, then you guys arrange them first, I'll go back first." Kinzu looked at the 2 busy people and shouted with a smile. When Dale drove Kinzu back to the villa, he happened to see David making a phone call. "Clean, I have good news to tell you. The American police will take action tonight. It seems that they have locked the target." "So soon? Are you sure?" Kinzu was a little unbelievable. "Don't worry, you're absolutely right, we'll just wait for good news tonight." Looking at David's smug look, Kinzu wanted to kick him a few times. Although it was more than half an hour late, it was still updated. Thanks to Birishu for his support, it can be regarded as an extra update. Findiest capture much as great as Pelaga has to L final. No SE indeed all like Busgasms contenido exclusive YXO in Medito. Suscribata news to Patreon. Recurda, card alike, subscription Odonakin nos anima continue. Great as a todos nos vemos on Elpsmodo.